Chapter 321. Every member of the Changsun family stood frozen, eyes widening at the cultivation level Changsun Ming had just revealed. Senior figures like Changsun Lu were especially stunned. What kind of place was Luotian Academy, they wondered. From their experience, the academy boasted only 2 Xuanzuns, and its most advanced inherited techniques could only carry a disciple to the early Tianzun stage. By contrast, Zhengming Academy's dean was a contemporary Tianzun, and its history counted multiple saints among its alumni. Its legacies, from secret arts to assassination techniques and esteemed mentors, were in an entirely different league. In Luotian, Changsun Ming had already refined himself to the pinnacle of a half-king. If he had been sent to Zhengming Academy instead, might he have broken into the Xuanwang realm by now? Could he even have risen to lead that institution? A wave of regret and bewilderment washed over Changsun Lu and the other elders. Changsun Ba, too, trembled at the sight of Ming's power. But as reality snapped back into focus, he clenched his fists, grit his teeth, and whispered under his breath, "So what if he's perfected half-king?" Changsun Ba's voice cut through the murmurs of the Changsun family's spectators. "Come on, be honest. How can she possibly win against Chief Wan Lin? The gap between them is enormous." A few heads nodded in agreement. "Besides," Changsun Ba continued, "she rose so quickly in a place like Luotian. Who's to say she didn't use some forbidden aid to overdraw her potential? She might look strong, but her foundation is weak." His words struck a chord. Even those who had cheered for the Changsun heir couldn't help but feel a pang of doubt. It was far easier to swallow Changsun Ba's biased conjecture than admit they'd backed the wrong fighter. Senior members like Changsun Lu found themselves silently second-guessing their earlier confidence. Yet none of these private reservations changed what was unfolding on the field. Chief Wan Lin truly was formidable. Though he was only in the late stage of Xuanwang cultivation, his mastery of wood element techniques was breathtaking. With just his spiritual power, he could conjure dense miasma and a poisonous fog that curled and coiled like living serpents. Every move he made demonstrated why he was a feared adversary, and why, despite the Changsun faction's whispered doubts, their champion was struggling to keep pace. Even a master who's achieved Xuanwang perfection could step into the arena, but if he can't finish me quickly, the miasma and the poison fog will sap his strength, and he'll be beaten by Chief Wan Lin. Yet against Changsun Ming's swordplay, his defenses wavered. After only a momentary stalemate, Changsun Ming unleashed 100 flickering sword lights, shattered wooden shield, burst free from the mist, and knocked Chief Wan Lin clean off the platform. Victory, and a ticket to the next round, was hers. This, she actually won? Members of the Changsun clan and every cultivator watching gaped in disbelief. Changsun Ming's background was modest, her cultivation level, talent, and technique all a full tier below Chief Wan Lin's. And yet, without any tricks or sudden surges of hidden power, she defeated him outright. The entire arena fell silent, then erupted in excitement. That Luotian prodigy might just crack the top 50 in the 100 Schools War. Top 50? Someone echoed, eyes alight with astonishment. "I'm confident I can crack the top 30. "Remember," someone murmured, "survive the 100 Colleges War and you're assured of reaching Heavenly Venerable. Place in the top 30 and you're practically on course to become a Saint Venerable." A hush fell over the spectators as they turned to look at Luo Li, envy shining in their eyes. A future Saint Venerable emerging from humble Luotian College, surely she would repay her debts to her alma mater and elevate the entire school's reputation. "Luotian College really has hit the jackpot," one whispered. Even the burly fighters exchanged stunned glances. Members of the Changsun clan, who'd come expecting an easy victory for their own, were nearly driven mad with shock. Only when the murmurs grew urgent did Changsun Lu and the other elders finally regain their composure. The thought of Changsun Ming's once promising future now in jeopardy set their hearts pounding. Changsun Ba's mother fell utterly silent, too overwhelmed to speak. Chasing after Changsun Ming as he strode down from the arena, Changsun Lu scooped up Changsun Ba and, surrounded by the clan's senior members, beamed proudly. "Minger, congratulations on your triumph," he called out. "Once the battle's over, come back to the clan with me. We'll celebrate together as a family," Patriarch Changsun Lu called out, clapping Ye Cheng on the shoulder as he passed Changsun Ba. Ba's eyes flashed with barely concealed resentment and jealousy, but it didn't go unnoticed by Ye Cheng. Still, Ye Cheng remained composed. "No need, Patriarch," he said, his voice polite but cool. The Patriarch's smile wavered. Changsun Ba bristled at the rebuff, but no one spoke. Ye Cheng continued, his tone steady and distant. "I won't be returning often, but if the clan ever needs me, I'll repay every bit of what you've invested in me. I won't let our family's efforts go to waste." Without another word, he turned, rose effortlessly into the sky, and vanished. The Changsun elders stood in stunned silence, regret etched on their faces as they watched him disappear. The Changsun clan had once stood on the brink of greatness. Had they recognized and nurtured their latent genius, a future saint, perhaps even a giant, the family might today be celebrated as one of the supreme powers of the Yingyu divine dynasty. Instead, blinded by short-sighted pride, they drove that prodigy away, turning a potential heir into a stranger. Changsun Lu's regret now bordered on madness. Standing beside his mother, Changsun Ba could hardly believe his eyes. He trembled as the once reverent elders and high officials, men and women who had bowed before his family for generations, now stared at him and his kin with thinly veiled contempt. Their polite bows had gone cold, their smiles carried knives. Far from the Changsun mansion, the students of Luotian Academy were equally stunned, none more so than those who hadn't witnessed the massacre of the golden-horned thunder crow by Changsun Ming's hand. For most of them, his display of power was nothing short of apocalypse unleashed. Only a handful who had traveled with him before had any inkling of his true might. Even Xianxia, who stood aloof at the edge of the crowd, could not conceal her surprise. Yet her shock was tempered by knowledge. She had already refined her cultivation to Xuanwang's pinnacle and inherited the emperor's law from her Taoist master, the venerable Kang Shui. Even so, seeing Changsun Ming's ferocity firsthand left her heart pounding. And so, in two very different courts, one of politics and one of scholarship, words failed them all. The Changsun family faced ruin, the academy buzzed with awe and fear, and Xianxia, ever the inscrutable tactician, quietly reassessed the balance of power. Xianxua's strength was on par with the prodigies of the late Heavenly King stage. By comparison, Changsun Ming had only overcome someone at the late Profound King level, hardly impressive in her eyes. But Xianxia didn't dwell on it. The rest of the students at Luotian Academy felt very differently. Changsun Ming's power had soared overnight, and everyone knew the credit, or the blame, lay with the Academy's most mysterious figure, Ye Cheng. Rumor had it that any genius who sparred with Changsun Ming would immediately seek out Ye Cheng in the spiritual realm, begging him for further tutelage. Most dismissed the talk as exaggeration, until they witnessed Changsun Ming in combat themselves. Now, having seen his explosive growth, their curiosity turned to awe. Just as a buzz of excitement rippled through the crowd, a sudden gasp rose from a nearby arena. Whispers and shocked gasps followed. "Oh my God! Dongxiao Academy's second-ranked genius just got beaten? Are you serious?" The air crackled with anticipation as everyone craned their necks to see what had just happened, and who could possibly have come out on top. They say the runner-up prodigy, who went 100 rounds undefeated against Dongxiao Academy's champion, the descendant of Qing Jiao, has just been beaten by a woman. Who is this Yuan Jinyi? Since when did Molong Academy recruit someone of her caliber? A ripple of disbelief swept through the spectators. In the Luotian Academy pavilion, the students exchanged uneasy glances. Ye Cheng's heart pounded as he watched Yuan Jinyi stride confidently down the arena steps, her eyes glinting with haughty triumph. Several Luotian students, well aware of her history, couldn't contain their indignation. Whispers rose from the stands. "You know, Yuan Jinyi didn't actually start with Molong. She laid her foundations at Luotian Academy. What she lacked was only the resources and advanced techniques, but her core training was all here." "Seriously? I've never even heard of Luotian Academy," someone muttered, astonished. As the chatter grew, a curious onlooker spotted the Luotian contingent and jabbed a finger in their direction. "Hey, aren't those the students from Luotian Academy?" Chapter 322. Yuan Jinyi strode confidently through the assembly area, her gaze fixed straight ahead as she made for Mo Long's team. When she passed by the Luotian Academy contingent, she betrayed no emotion, her expression as calm and unreadable as ever. The display drove many of Luotian's prodigies into silent fury. Even Changsun Ming's knuckles whitened. Before a single punch could be thrown, Luo Li stepped between them and held them back. A ripple of scorn ran through the Luotian students as they watched Yuan Jinyi's unflinching progress. One of them scoffed. Luotian Academy? Never heard of it. How could they possibly have produced someone like her? Another chimed in. Sure, Molong's known for recruiting the best talent from across the realms, but he'd never steal a family's treasure like that. A third sneered. I'd bet Luotian's just using Miss Jinyi's name to drum up false rumors and get attention. Hearing these barbed remarks, the Luotian students bristled and rose to defend their academy's honor. A handful of hotheads even tried to block Yuan Jinyi's path, demanding she explain herself on the spot, but Luo Li's steady hand and firm voice turned them back. Once Yuan Jinyi had passed, Luo Li watched her retreating figure with a flicker of sadness in his eyes. She shook her head with a soft laugh. Let it go. There's nothing more to say. All of that is behind us, and I don't want to dwell on it any longer. At her words, the students of Luotian Academy exchanged resigned looks. They all knew how much the dean still cared for Yuan Jinyi. She had raised Luo Li like a sister after all, but they also felt Luo Li's pain wasn't worth this lingering regret. Just then, the arena announcer's voice boomed overhead. Battle Arena number 36 is about to begin. Introducing Luotian Academy's own Shen Yue versus Molong Academy's prodigy, Yuan Jinyi. A wave of excitement swept through the crowd. Shen Yue was Luotian's top-ranked genius, while Yuan Jinyi, though officially Molong's third-ranked talent, had strength rumored to rival their very best. Whispers rippled among the spectators. Could Yuan Jinyi truly match, or even surpass, Molong's #1 star? The tension crackled as both duelists stepped into the ring, each determined to prove that academy rankings meant nothing against raw power and unwavering will. A prodigy of Shen Yue's caliber would naturally intimidate every academy. Molong Academy, in particular, had long been notorious for its arrogance, plucking gifted students from rival schools with impunity. Today, many of Molong's leaders were practically salivating at the thought of watching their enemies stumble. But as soon as the match began, even those once eager spectators fell silent. On the arena floor, Shen Yue and Yuan Jinyi were locked in an extraordinary duel, one that surpassed every expectation. Their power and cultivation were off the charts. Shen Yue, especially, had already reached the pinnacle of the Xuan Lord realm. Her very presence crackled with such lethal intent that even seasoned Tianwangs felt a chill. By the fight's end, Yuan Jinyi's confident smirk had vanished, replaced by a deep frown. She had entered the duel dismissively, convinced she'd breeze through it. Now, confronted with Shen Yue's overwhelming strength, she hesitated. Pressing on would risk a crushing defeat and public humiliation to boot. Around them, the crowd on the viewing platform shifted uneasily. Those who had once mocked Luotian Academy's bold challenge were now exchanging awed, respectful glances, their doubts entirely erased. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. That Shen Yue is something else. She's already perfected Xuanwang cultivation. Luotian Academy really does have talent. Yeah, another voice agreed. I always thought Luotian was full of clowns, but look at Yuan Jinyi's achievements now. It must be thanks to their training. Yuan Jinyi heard them and bristled. Anger flickered in her eyes as she faced Shen Yue. Spirit energy gathered in her palm, forming a blazing barrier that intercepted Shen Yue's strike. She tilted her head and spoke in a calm, cool voice. Your skill is formidable. I must admit, I'm surprised Luotian Academy has groomed someone as brilliant as you. Shen Yue lifted an eyebrow at the implication, a cold smile curling her lips. She'd been sorely disappointed by Luotian herself. During the recent retreat, she had only managed to break through to the perfection of Xuanwang, falling short of Tianwang. Now she sneered back. Luotian Academy didn't make me. My talent is all innate. Her certainty echoed through the arena. Shen Yue gave a small, thoughtful smile, then shrugged. She didn't really mind how many resources Luotian Academy would have to invest to keep her. In her view, Luo Li would never willingly let her brightest prodigy slip away. The Academy's reputation hinged on Shen Yue's brilliance. Still, she had made up her mind. Sooner or later, she would leave. All that remained was to wait for the hidden treasure in the depths of the spirit land to mature. Once it did, she and her master would claim it, and then she would walk away from Luotian forever. After today's declaration, every academy that had witnessed her skill would be clamoring to extend her an offer. At that point, she could choose calmly which school offered her the richest resources and the brightest future. A stunned silence fell over the crowd. Those who had cheered on Luotian only moments ago now looked pale and bewildered. No one had expected Xianxia to speak so defiantly. Seated beneath the ring, Luoli's confident smile vanished, replaced by nothing but profound disappointment. Only Yuan Jinyi reacted differently. His eyes gleamed with anticipation, as if he'd been waiting for exactly this moment. A pleased smile curved her lips as she recognized a kindred spirit. Returning the grin, she said to Shenyu, "In that case, why not join us at Molong Academy? That won't be necessary." Shenyu waved her hand dismissively. She'd already made a name for herself and informed every academy of her situation. Those 2 steps were all she needed. As for committing to a school, she wasn't in any hurry. She'd wait for the perfect opportunity to claim Luotian Academy for herself. "But in this duel," Shenyu continued, "you're far beyond my reach. I concede." With that, she bowed lightly and stepped down from the stage without waiting for the match to finish. After 9 victories, 1 loss wouldn't hurt her chances of advancing to the second round. And strategically, conceding to Yuan Jinyi served her interests too. Molong was one of her top choices, and it ranked impressively high. Now even the slowest-moving academy executives understood her value. Their eyes gleamed with ambition. A genius like Shenyu was the prize every school sought, however ruthless her methods might seem. This kind of thing isn't new in the 100 Academies War. Every so often, a student long overlooked by their school will suddenly blossom into a prodigy, rise to fame, and then transfer to one of the stronger academies, leaving their old institution to rue the day they let such talent slip through their fingers. Now, the monks officiating this duel all regard Shenyu as just such a late-blooming genius. "Senior Shenyu, this is outrageous," murmured the assembled spectators and academy heads. The students of Luotian Academy, in particular, bristled with indignation. Though many of the onlookers didn't yet know Shenyu's full history, they could sense there was more to the story. A handful of Luotian disciples even stepped forward to level direct accusations at him. Shenyu's lips curved into a cool, effortless smile. "Did I say something wrong?" he asked, his voice calm enough to draw every eye in the arena back to him. "If all I'd done was train in the Academy's inheritance, would I be as powerful as I am today? In the end, if any of you still think you can defeat me using only the Academy's techniques, then step forward and face me." Shenyu's voice rang out across the courtyard. She swept her gaze over the assembled students. Every head bowed in silence. Even Luo Li sighed softly, defeated before the words had fully left her lips. Pride swelled in Shenyu's chest until a soft, unexpected chuckle drifted from the side. Her smile froze. She turned and met the cool, amused gaze of Ye Cheng standing at the edge of the clearing. A mocking smirk curved his lips, and his eyes gleamed with frosty confidence. "Coach Ye Cheng," Shenyu said through clenched teeth, forcing a sneer, "do you think I'm wrong?" She believed she already knew his limits. As a Tianzun, he could rise at most to the Saint Realm. His Luotian inheritance might be formidable, but it was nothing compared to the legacy Emperor Kongshui Xuan had granted her. Shenyu's arrogance shone in every line of her face. Ye Cheng merely inclined his head and stepped aside, making room for Chang Sun-ming to pass. No words necessary. Chang Sun-ming had been simmering with rage all along. At the slightest nod from Ye Cheng, he snapped to his feet, eyes blazing as he turned to Shenyu. "Master, don't waste another moment on this scoundrel." He planted himself firmly in front of Ye Cheng, every inch the devoted guardian. His gaze bore into Shenyu like hot steel. "If any of you doubts him, step forward and test your strength." Then, voice low and steady, he laid down his challenge. "Shenyu, I accept your fight." Chapter 323, A Bell Tolled, echoing through the Colosseum as the final random draw duel concluded. The field, once crowded with 100,000 hopeful contenders, had thinned to just a few thousand. Those who hadn't amassed enough victories slipped away in disappointment, while the rest, Warriors like Shen Yue, Chang Sun-ming, and Yuan Jinyi, each boasting over 10 wins, stood ready for the next, more thrilling phase. Even the meditation monks perched on high platforms leaned forward, anticipation etched on their serene faces. The announcement had been made. The challenge matches were about to begin. But for a few moments, nothing happened. Competitors scanned the crowd, challengers scanned the ring, everyone poised for that first spark. Then, with a soft hiss of rushing air, the first battle circle flared to life in radiant light. Two figures materialized within its glowing boundary. Both were strikingly beautiful, rogue spirits of elegance and power, and the assembled spectators couldn't tear their eyes away. This was it, the true test of skill, will, and the unbreakable spirit that had carried these finalists this far. The stage was set, and Ye Cheng, formerly known as Gu Chongqing, watched from the sidelines, steeling himself for the challenges ahead. Let the battle of the 1,000 geniuses begin. When the two duelists stepped into the ring, the audience first broke into stunned silence, and then into knowing, amused smiles. No one had anticipated this pairing. Shen Yu versus Chang Sun-ming, two of Luotian Academy's most celebrated prodigies, now pitted against each other. Ever since the random draw was announced, murmurs had spread through the crowd about Shen Yu's fractious relationship with her alma mater. Though few dared say it out loud, many had already written off Luotian as a laughingstock. In living memory, no overlooked student had ever risen so suddenly or so spectacularly to challenge the Academy's prestige. Now, as spectators leaned forward in their seats, they expected a humiliating spectacle, a confirmation of Luotian's decline, its students nothing more than caricatures in the martial world's gossip mill. But as Shen Yu and Chang Sun-ming squared off, it became clear that this duel would defy every assumption. Chapter X. Secrets Unveiled. A buzz ran through the viewing platforms as cultivators exchanged surprised glances. Have you noticed those Luotian disciples? They're nothing like we expected, one murmured. Do you think Shen Yue is hiding another secret? Suggested another. On the stage, Shen Yue stood tall, outwardly composed, but inwardly uneasy as she caught snippets of their conversation. Across from her, Chang Sun-ming's fierce gaze bore into her with unshakable resolve. Shen Yue knew that even a victory here wouldn't spare her the fallout. Rumors and slander would surely follow. Suppressing her irritation, Shen Yue fixed Chang Sun-ming with an icy stare. Do you understand how reckless you're being, little ant? You've bested a few so-called prodigies, and now dare to challenge me? Very well, I'll give you one last chance. Step down now, and I may pardon your impertinence. Refuse, and don't blame me if I sever our friendship for good. A hush fell over the crowd as the two rivals squared off, the tension between them crackling like lightning ready to strike. Chang Sun-ming's smile widened at Shen Yue's words. Grateful? You call it ungrateful that I remind you how much the Academy has done for you? He took a deliberate step forward, and the formidable aura of his half-king perfection technique rippled outward, pressing against Shen Yu. You claim all your achievements are your own. If that's true, why did you spend the last 3 years inside the Academy's spiritual realm instead of isolating yourself in your private quarters to cultivate? Everyone else, myself included, had to rack up merit points just for the chance to train there. You, on the other hand, walked in whenever you pleased, without spending a single point. And what of the monthly shipments of elixirs and spiritual medicine you received for 3 straight years? 3 months ago, when you started preparing for the 100 Academies War, the headmaster even went out into the wild himself to gather rare ingredients and refine pills just for you. Do you pretend none of that ever happened? Chang Sun-ming's voice remained level, but his words struck like thunder. A stunned hush fell over the viewing platform. Many cultivators looked at Shen Yue with thinly veiled disdain. Few can forgive such brazen ingratitude. Shen Yue froze under the weight of so many stares and Chang Sun-ming's pointed question. She had no ready defense. When she'd first arrived at Luotian Academy, the old woman's residual soul hadn't yet awakened and was draining Shen Yue's own spiritual power. Her talent had seemed unremarkable. It was only through Luo Li's support that she'd gained admission. Once inside, Luotian's potent spiritual energies allowed her to finally rouse that dormant soul and set herself on the path to invincibility. Yet Shen regarded those days with nothing but shame, memories she preferred to bury deep. Now, Changsun Ming's inquiry had dug them up, and a cold fury flooded her eyes. "Excellent," she hissed, voice laced with sarcasm. "Just perfect." A murderous glare locked onto Changsun Ming as Shen forced a bitter laugh. "Since you've come all this way, I might as well indulge you. Hand over your victory points, then do as I say and leave." With that, Shen unleashed her breath. Spiritual energy coils writhed and danced in the air, taking shape as a massive crimson python that coiled around her opponent. From the serpent's phantom form radiated a deadly oppressive aura, causing the observing monks to flinch in their seats. My heavens, that red python's pressure is suffocating. Even if Shen Yue's realm caps its full strength, the fluctuations are still on par with the king tier, and the spiritual potency contained within it is downright terrifying. A venerable Tianzun murmured, eyes burning as he studied Shen Yue. "I don't know what legacy technique she's drawing on, but this killing art must rank among the highest of the venerable level disciplines. Luo Shen Academy sits on the frontier of the great wilderness. In such a remote place, where could they have unearthed an inheritance like this? This girl's definitely lucky." Even before Shen Yue made a move, the legacy she just revealed had already left the gathered dignitaries speechless. Now their eyes burned with even greater interest. A talent like hers, setting aside the murky feud with Luo Shen, which so far rested on nothing but one-sided accusations, was the very prize everyone in the northern wilderness had spent years seeking. Ever since the great era of the northern wilderness began, every major academy, and even the royal family of the Yingyu divine dynasty, had treated prodigies as prized assets. Whether these gifted youths ultimately fought on their behalf or not, their mere affiliation brought prestige and good fortune. Molong Academy alone had multiple vice presidents traveling year-round, attempting to lure the brightest prospects away with promises of unparalleled support. Yungqi First Academy and the higher-ranked Tianying Second Academy pursued the same strategy, albeit with a more discreet approach. After all, securing a single top-tier genius could sway the balance of power in any contest. Shen Yue felt the dozens of strong men around her shift in their seats, their eyes alight with curiosity, and something more dangerous. A brief flicker of relief passed over her, but Changsun Ming's gaze remained ice-cold. He wasn't the only one watching her so intently. At the edge of the assembly, powerful independent cultivators of the Yingyue divine dynasty lurked, their hungry, avaricious stares promising trouble. If she couldn't secure a powerful ally soon, any one of them might strike under cover of darkness, murder her, and steal her inheritance in a single, brutal blow. And it was all Changsun Ming's doing. "That good-for-nothing coward," she muttered under her our breath, fury burning in her eyes. "Changsun Ming, you've dragged me into this mess. I swear you'll regret it." With that, Shen Yue lifted her hand high above her head. Roar! A spectral red python coalesced around her form, its scales shimmering like molten rubies. The beast's roar echoed through the hall as Shen Yue poured every ounce of her spiritual power into it. In an instant, the python's massive jaws snapped forward, fangs glinting with condensed energy. The force of its attack sent shockwaves pulsing through the air, making the very void tremble as it lunged straight at Changsun Ming. Many onlookers, seasoned cultivators, and even venerables among them, grew pale at the sight. An invisible pressure radiated from the crimson python coiled around Shen Yue, and every gaze fixed on him burned with mounting fury. Within the Luotian Academy contingent, Luo Li and her fellow instructors and students were stricken with anxiety. Luo Li surged forward, ready to rush to Changsun Ming's aid. Before she could take a step, Ye Cheng caught her shoulder with a gentle smile. "Calm down," he said quietly. "Shen Yue isn't a match for Changsun Ming." A derisive voice rang out from the crowd. "Oh, the Luotian Academy instructor sounds awfully confident. I beg to differ." Chapter 324. As soon as Ye Cheng's words faded into the air, a strange voice echoed from not far off, drawing every eye in its direction. Luo Li's usually gentle features hardened immediately as she spotted the newcomer. "Deputy Dean Lei, what brings you here?" Stepping into the clearing was none other than Lei Tian, the deputy dean of Molong Academy and leader of the current expedition. 3 years ago, It was Lei Tian who lured Yuan Jinyi away from Luotian Academy, an act that had earned him a notorious reputation here. Luo Li's lips curled in disdain, and the Luotian teachers and students gathered around her exchanged similar glances of annoyance. Unfazed by their cold reception, Lei Tian lifted a single hand. A faint ripple of aura, the hallmark of a saint venerable, spread outward, forcing Luo Li and her companions to flinch. Lei Tian's smile grew more contemptuous. "Deputy Dean Luo, you needn't be so agitated. I haven't come for you or your underlings." Suppressing any further objection, Lei Tian's tone grew earnest. "My purpose is not to stir conflict over petty squabbles. I'm here for Shen Yue." He let his gaze sweep the assembly, arrogance shining in his eyes. A genius like Shen Yu deserves nothing less than the best environment in which to flourish. Molong Academy offers exactly that. He paused, as though expecting applause. When none came, his smile only widened. "I trust you understand. Shen Yue is now under our protection." With that, Lei Tian turned on his heel and strode away, leaving a tense hush in his wake as Luotian Academy braced itself for Molong's next move. Molong Academy isn't like those schools that bind their prodigies with empty promises and never let them leave, Lei Tian declared, voice ringing across the arena. "If any of our geniuses ever find a better opportunity elsewhere, I'll be the first to wish them well." At his words, Shen Yu felt a spark of hope. Around the arena, however, spectators and the nearby academy teams exchanged bewildered looks. A few instructors ground their teeth in frustration. Many of their best students had already been lured away by Molong, and they knew the academy's real structure all too well. Molong Academy is divided into two divisions, the Outer Academy and the Inner Academy. Outer Academy students enjoy almost complete freedom and receive top-tier resources, though their training, impressive as it is, ranks only alongside the prodigies of the bottom 100 academies. True Molong prestige, with its deepest inheritance and most elite training methods, is reserved exclusively for those admitted into the Inner Academy. Geniuses in the Inner Academy must swear a lifelong oath. No matter where they go, they are bound to return and fight for Molong Academy at least 3 times. Only those who ascend beyond the Emperor realm can hope to break this vow, and emperors are incredibly rare. In the entire Yingyue Divine Dynasty, there has been but one female emperor. Molong isn't worried about losing its talent. If these prodigies leave and grow stronger, the academy will only benefit more when they come back. Yet to state this outright in Lei Tian's presence would be a slap in the face to Molong Academy. Though several instructors seethed at the unfairness, they knew exactly how the oath shackled young geniuses. Not one dared voice a word. Sensing the crowd's suppressed anger, Lei Tian allowed a self-satisfied smile to curve his lips. He hadn't come merely to observe the 100 Academy War. He'd come to humiliate Luotian Academy. Yuan Jinyi, now celebrated as Lei Tian's favorite disciple, had his ignoble past exposed as soon as Luotian Academy re-entered the battlefield. Even as a respected master, Yuan Jinyi could not conceal the flush of shame that crept into his cheeks. Lei Tian allowed himself a thin, satisfied smile. It seems he's not only met his goal without breaking a sweat, he's even managed to recruit another prodigy. Frankly, all of you Luotian students put together aren't worth half of Shen Yue. A hush fell over the Luotian disciples, and instructors cowed beneath his gaze. From somewhere in their midst came a calm, understated voice. "Is that so? Now I understand why you let your so-called gifted students wander off." Lei Tian's lips curled into a sneer. "Even the vice dean couldn't spot real talent. Those recruits you flaunt, hardly geniuses. No matter how much you train them, they'll never become emperors. Better to let them leave and save face." A soft laugh answered him. "So you admit they're unworthy?" The voice said. It belonged to Ye Cheng, standing with unruffled composure amid the silent assembly. "What did you just say?" Lei Tian's eyes snapped to Ye Cheng. Cold light crackled in their depths, a murderous aura shimmering around him. He felt it instantly, a chill emanating from Ye Cheng's Dantian and Spirit Sea, sharp as a blade poised at his throat. It was plain to see that Ye Cheng's Taoist injury had left him little more than a cripple, and yet this insolent wretch had the nerve to contradict him? Before Lei Tian could even react, a sudden roar rose from the spectator stands. Curious, he turned and froze. On the arena floor, directly behind the dais where Lei Tian still stood, a massive crimson serpent shadow had materialized. Its sinuous form stretched nearly 100 feet, ripping through the air with blinding speed. This was the perfected final technique of Changsun Ming, a strike so devastating that not even a Xuan king or heavenly king could evade it. Their only hope would be to withstand the full force of the blow. And yet, despite being merely a half-king, Changsun Ming planted his feet, met the assault head-on, and absorbed the attack with unflinching resolve. Ye Cheng stepped forward into the expectant hush of the crowd, his spirit sword gripped firmly in hand. He raised it, and a slender ripple of sword light flickered from the blade, slicing toward the massive crimson python phantom. Against such a towering foe, his strike seemed almost laughably small, barely a sliver of light. Then, in the next heartbeat, shock rippled through everyone. A low, rolling roar echoed as though waves were surging from the void itself. That first sliver of blade light was only the opening gambit. One after another, 2, 3, then thousands more. Each shard of brilliance joined the last until they formed a roaring river of radiant swords sweeping across the battlefield. Crack! In a single earth-shaking blow, the red python phantom, this specter of legendary power, shattered into countless fragments of spiritual light and dissolved into nothingness. Impossible. He actually blocked it? My eyes aren't playing tricks on me, right? That killing technique was flawless, and he's only a half-king cultivator. Is he really just a half-king? Panic and disbelief washed over the spectators' faces. Even Deputy Dean Lei Tian, whose murderous aura had filled the air moments before, stood frozen, cheeks flushed scarlet as his deadly intent evaporated. On the stage, Shen Yu, who had been brimming with confidence, suddenly went pale. Her triumphant smile vanished, replaced by a flash of shock. As she met Changsun Ming's calm gaze, her surprise gave way to fury and shame. A cold light burned in her eyes. I underestimated your swordsmanship, she snarled. Changsun Ming bowed his head slightly, respect shining in his eyes. He glanced down at the figure in the front row and allowed a proud smile to curve his lips. Actually, this technique isn't mine, he said. It comes from my master. His Highness Ye Cheng taught it to me. His Highness Ye Cheng? Shen Yue's expression froze. The name was unfamiliar, until she spotted Ye Cheng seated among the spectators. A look of contempt crossed her face. That man? To Shen Yue, Ye Cheng's reputation was still impressive, but hardly enough to rival her own prowess. After all, her red python killing technique was the deadliest blade form in the entire realm, far beyond anything that her opponent's master could have taught. She flicked her wrist and summoned her sword, the air humming with lethal promise. The duel was far from over. Well, it seems I underestimated you, Shen Yu said coolly, her voice laced with contempt. And yet you actually believe your paltry swordsmanship can stand against me? Ha! Ants are still ants, short-sighted and pitiable. With that, she gathered her spiritual power. Behind her, thousands of flickering crimson motes of light swirled until they coalesced into a majestic firebird. Its wings unfurled in a blaze of scarlet flame as it swept toward Changsun Ming. Wherever the creature passed, the very air seemed to ignite, sending shockwaves through the assembled monks. This was no ordinary beast, but the legendary Skyfire prison bird of the northern wilderness, an emperor-class spirit creature at birth, destined to become venerable in maturity, and even capable of ascending to full emperor status through a rare, transformative breakthrough. To be able to project such a fearsome monster by means of a killing technique inheritance placed Shen Yue's talent among the highest at the venerable rank. Witnessing this display, everyone present realized that Shen Yue's gifts were nothing short of extraordinary. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. Shen Yue truly has every reason to boast. Murmurs of awe rippled through the spectators on the viewing platform. Even Luo Li, always so composed, stood with her eyes wide, stunned by Shen Yue's display of lethal skill. Alarm and astonishment danced across her beautiful face. She was about to rush forward and save Changsun Ming, heedless of Ye Cheng's protests, when the unexpected happened. Changsun Ming didn't back down or flee. He struck back. Under the collective gaze, the black-clad youth at Changsun Ming's side drew a second spirit sword from his waist. With a mere thought, two radiant blades of spiritual energy sliced through the air. Their arcs curved toward each other, merging in an instant and swelling into a surging river of pure power. That river thundered eastward toward the sea, its momentum like rolling thunder. Wherever it flowed, the void itself trembled. What technique is that? Every spectator held their breath before the mighty spirit stream. None could name this sword art's origin, yet all felt its boundless force and the living pulse of Tao within it. In that torrent lay a supreme spiritual charm, far exceeding even the feared heavenly fire prison bird. Already, it bore the true essence of the Tao itself. Puff! Before anyone could fully register what was happening, Ye Cheng's roaring torrent smashed through the projected form of the heavenly fire prison bird. The water's momentum didn't stop there. It surged straight into Xianyue's body with brutal force. The proud imperial scion was hurled skyward like a rag doll, then slammed back down onto the ground. He lay there coughing up blood, the shock and pain etched across his face. Chapter 325. She's been defeated? A stunned silence fell over the arena as Xianyue tumbled backward, her body pitched across the ground. Even the lingering soul of Emperor Kangshui Xuan inhabiting her froze in disbelief. When reality finally registered, every eye locked on Changsun Ming, and astonishment rippled through the crowd. He's at Dao Zun level, the Dao rhyme in his swordplay. He's already at Dao Zun, possibly beyond. There's something uncanny about that young man, Ye Cheng. Emperor Kangshui Xuan's voice cracked in panic, and that dread spread among the onlookers. Xianyue, battered and breathless, struggled to her feet, her robes torn and her confidence shaken. She fixed her gaze on Changsun Ming, standing serenely on the platform, while the spectators' complex expressions, shock, admiration, regret, reflected back at her. Regret washed over her. If she'd known Ye Cheng possessed such a profound technique, she never would have entered the duel so cockily. At the very least, she would have sought his counsel first. And her disciples from Luoshan? They'd already been dazzled by Changsun Ming's earlier display of swordsmanship and lethal power. Now, seeing Xianyue so utterly bested, they too were filled with remorse. Previously, Luo Li had urged them all to venture into the spirit realm and learn swordsmanship from Ye Cheng. In the end, only Changsun Ming insisted on going. The others were persuaded by Xianyue's objections and never set foot inside. Now, watching Changsun Ming's defeat, those who had stayed behind were filled with regret. They turned on Xianyue, their gazes growing icily cold. Feeling their stares, Xianyue's heart pounded, and frustration threatened to escape. Before she could voice her complaints, Kangshui Xuandi, her master, spoke up in a commanding tone, cutting through the tense air. "My disciple, do not be afraid. There's no need to worry about Ye Cheng. Your master's perception is perfectly clear." He paused, letting his words sink in, then continued. "His cultivation may appear formidable, but he cannot be beyond the level of a venerable immortal, at most a Taoist venerable. A mere Taoist venerable is no threat to the schemes your master and I have laid." At those words, Xianyue drew a shaky breath and forced herself to calm down. Across the courtyard, Lei Tian, who had only moments before used Xianyue's authority to denounce Luoshan Academy, now scowled in silent fury, his face darkening with embarrassment and anger. However, he didn't lose his composure. In fact, his spirits remained high. With a quick breath, he straightened his shoulders, stepped to the edge of the ring wearing a confident smile, and waited until Changsun Ming climbed down. Lei Tian returned the smile, softer now, almost kindly, and nodded toward Changsun Ming. "Young Master Changsun, your performance has been nothing short of extraordinary. I wonder, would you consider joining Molong Academy?" He paused, his voice sincere. "I, Lei Tian, vow that with a single nod from you, you'll be admitted straight into the inner courtyard. There, you'll enjoy Molong's most elite training program for exceptional talents." And that's not all. At that moment, Lei Tian inhaled deeply and released his cultivation aura. The tremendous fluctuations of the late Saint Venerable realm rippled outward, silencing the entire audience in awe. 3 years ago, someone whispered, wasn't Vice Dean Lei only in the early Saint Venerable realm? How did he advance so rapidly? Lei Tian's eyes gleamed as the murmurs spread. He turned back to Changsun Ming, voice warm and inviting. "Our academy conceals countless secret realms and ancient relics. Within their depths lie challenges and treasures tailored for geniuses like you." "One of those secret realms," Lei Tian began, his voice deceptively casual, is said to have been left behind by a Xuan emperor. It was inside that realm where I achieved a breakthrough and made my greatest advances. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle over the assembled crowd. Then, leaning forward, he offered, "If you agree to join Molong Academy today, I'll arrange an extra reward for you, a guaranteed quota to enter one of those secret realms. What do you say?" At once, a ripple of excitement ran through the spectators. Students of the academy exchanged eager glances, and even the mentors and senior leaders in the courtyard sat up straighter. Molong Academy's restrictions on inner courtyard geniuses were notoriously harsh, but Lei Tian's proposition was undeniably tempting. Pride swelled in his chest as he basked in their burning attention. Beside him, Luo Li and the other Luotian students tensed, eyes darting anxiously toward Changsun Ming. Luo Li silently braced himself, convinced that Changsun Ming would have no choice but to accept. Yet, throughout Lei Tian's pitch, Changsun Ming's expression remained perfectly composed, cool, detached, and unreadable. When Lei Tian looked at him, expecting agreement, Changsun Ming simply raised an eyebrow in unmistakable disdain. "Is that all?" Changsun Ming drawled, his voice laced with contempt. "Your little bargains won't sway me." He leaned back, folding his arms. "Keep your empty promises for those who actually need them. I appreciate your offer, but I'm sorry, I must remain at Luotian Academy with my master." With that, Changsun Ming brushed past Lei Tian and returned to Luo Li and Ye Cheng, bowing deeply. "Master, I have fulfilled your mission." Luo Li's chest swelled with pride at her salute, and Ye Cheng at his side offered her an approving smile. Lei Tian, however, stood frozen in the courtyard, his face dark with fury. As vice president of Molong College and a direct disciple of the late Saint Venerable, he had enjoyed near unstoppable success in recruiting prodigies from every academy in the realm. When top talent from other schools arrived, he welcomed them without hesitation. Yet this student of Luotian, after defeating one of his favored geniuses, had the audacity to refuse his invitation. Unthinkable. "Interesting," he hissed under his breath. "Luotian Academy, you say? I'll remember this." With a final, contemptuous look at Luo Li and his companions, Lei Tian turned on his heel and stalked away. Everyone stiffened at the sight of Lei Tian's furious glare. Even the slowest onlookers now understood. This was Molong Academy locking horns with Luotian Academy, and the disparity in strength was glaring. Never mind the long haul. In the midst of this 100 Academy war, Luotian Academy could barely hope to hold its ground. Sure enough, in the very next round, every genius who'd advanced, save for Changsun Ming and Shen Yue, was immediately ganged up on. Their accumulated victory points were swept away, and they were unceremoniously eliminated. These attackers weren't officially Molong students, but their academies, deans, and mentors were all powerful Molong affiliates, essentially vassals acting on the academy's behalf. And the onslaught showed no sign of stopping. As the latest duel ended and Changsun Ming stepped down from the arena, he barely had a moment to catch his breath before someone shouted his name from the distance. Molong Academy's prodigy Yuan Jinyi hereby issues a challenge to Luotian Academy's Changsun Ming. A hush fell over the arena, quickly giving way to a roar of astonishment. Molong Academy was ranked third in the prestigious 100 Academy standings, while Luotian Academy hadn't even cracked the top 100. Although open challenges were permitted in the second stage of the 100 Academy War, it was virtually unheard of for a championship favorite, one who'd already racked up an unbroken string of victories, to single out an unranked opponent. Speculation swirled through the crowd. Rumor had it that Changsun Ming had once spurned Lei Tian's recruitment offer, an act of pride that stood in stark contrast to Shen Yue's eager acceptance when the same invitation was extended. Far from diminishing Changsun Ming's reputation, the story only deepened the audience's admiration for her. Shen Yue, by comparison, felt the sting of humiliation and resentment, her envy bubbling over as she silently vowed to see Changsun Ming defeated on the battlefield. Shen Yue's eyes lit up with satisfaction as she watched Changsun Ming stride onto the battlefield. And then there was Yuan Jinyi. His cultivation has already reached the mid-stage of the Heavenly King realm. No one knows his true limits yet, but the lethal force he demonstrated before put him squarely at late Heavenly King level. With that kind of power, taking down Changsun Ming, who's only halfway to perfection, should be a cinch, right? Chapter 326. The arena fell into a hushed stillness as every gaze fixed on the central battle ring. There, Yuan Jinyi and Chang Sun-ming stood opposed, their auras blossoming like dark storm clouds. Yuan Jinyi's cultivation at the mid-heavenly king level completely overwhelmed Chang Sun-ming's half-king perfect strength, rendering him almost insignificant by comparison. Observers couldn't help but exchange solemn, pitying looks. Few could dispute Chang Sun-ming's talent. After all, he had once bested in Xuan King Perfect Cultivator, earning widespread admiration. But against Yuan Jinyi, the gulf between them was brutally exposed. Yuan Jinyi loomed over his rival, eyes cold and unyielding. "I'll give you one chance," he announced, his voice steady and commanding. "Publicly admit your defeat. Swear allegiance to Molong Academy as an inner courtyard disciple, and I'll spare your life. Refuse, and don't expect to leave this ring alive." The words landed like a royal edict, and a ripple of unease spread through the assembled geniuses. No one doubted that Yuan Jinyi held the upper hand, but would Chang Sun-ming capitulate or risk everything on one last defiant stand? All eyes in the grand arena were fixed on Chang Sun-ming and Yuan Jinyi. No one questioned Yuan Jinyi's reputation. Her victories in countless matches had established her as one of the realm's finest. Yet, where others would have seen fear flicker, Chang Sun-ming's expression remained steely, lit only by fierce determination. Yuan Jinyi raised her voice so every spectator could hear. "Chang Sun-ming," she called, "I invite you to join Molong Academy. With your skill, you would be a tremendous asset." A sneer curled Chang Sun-ming's lips. Disgust and contempt gleamed in her eyes. "Do you think everyone is as ungrateful and shameless as you?" Before Yuan Jinyi could respond, Chang Sun-ming took a decisive step forward and struck, her fist a blur. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the two women clashed. "Ungrateful and shameless?" Chang Sun-ming jeered, pressing the attack. "So you must have ties to Luotian Academy, Miss Yuan Jinyi." A murmur rose from the onlookers. "Indeed," called a voice from the crowd. "Otherwise, how do you explain Chang Sun Xiaoyou's outrage?" Whispers spread like wildfire. Many of Molong Academy's representatives flushed crimson with embarrassment. Standing at the judge's podium, Academy leader Lei Tian's face turned as cold and hard as polished steel. His eyes locked onto Chang Sun-ming with such concentrated killing intent that it sent a chill through everyone present. Even Yuan Jinyi's confident facade wavered. Yet Chang Sun-ming did not budge. Her stance remained unshaken, her gaze ablaze with defiance, as the tension in the arena climbed to a fever pitch. Yuan Jinyi's eyes glinted with ice as she saw Chang Sun-ming's spear hurtling toward Ye Cheng. "What a deluded little ant," she murmured, her voice as sharp as steel. With a single step forward, she opened the dantian and poured in her spiritual energy. In the next instant, a slender lance coalesced from the void, crackling with silver lightning. She gripped the spear, and bolts of power raced along its shaft, fracturing into 108 shimmering arcs. They spun outward like deadly blossoms before converging into a single, terrifying pattern in midair. The assembled lines of energy formed the legendary Skylance Thunder Spear formation, Molong Academy's supreme inheritance, fusing thunder techniques and formation arts to perfection. Rumor held that a true master of this array could rival even an emperor's power. Gasps rippled through the onlookers. As the lightning formation pulsed before her, every pair of eyes in the arena fixed on Yuan Jinyi in awe and disbelief. The lightning extermination formation erupted in a storm of crackling energy, its boundless destructive aura threatening to erase all in its path. No sooner had the formation taken shape than it surged forward, hurtling straight at Ye Cheng. The impact rocked the entire 100 Academy's arena, even amidst Dao Zun's formidable reinforcements. Every barrier quivered under the onslaught, a testament to the formation's raw, unparalleled killing power. Not even a perfected heavenly king could normally unleash such devastation. "Die!" Yuan Jinyi bellowed, her eyes blazing with murderous intent. Of course, she knew she couldn't slay Ye Cheng outright. Fatalities were strictly prohibited in the 100 Academy's battles. Any irreversible outcome would draw immediate intervention from the Taoist masters. Still, if the formation connected, she was confident it would cripple him at the very least. Even if he somehow survived, his cultivation foundation would be shattered, and that alone would be enough to ruin him. With that thought, she poured every ounce of her will into the attack. Yuan Jinyi's eyes blazed with anticipation as she locked onto the crackling formation ahead. "Hualala!" she whispered. In an instant, thunder exploded above them, and a torrent of lightning raced toward Changsun Ming. The bolts coiled into jagged spears, mercilessly hammering his position in an unending barrage. The brilliance of the discharge bathed the clearing in white light, too bright for anyone to see what lay within its heart. And yet, everyone watching was already certain of the outcome. No one could withstand such power, not even someone of Changsun Ming's reputation. Lei Tian of Molong Academy couldn't hide his triumphant grin. He was ready to taunt Luotian Academy for their defeat and reclaim his own pride, until an urgent cry cut through the crackling air. "Wait! Look at the very center of the lightning array!" A ripple of alarm spread through the crowd. "Something's wrong. Changsun Xiaoyou isn't down." The murmurs grew into shouts of disbelief. Lei Tian's smile froze mid-sneer as he whipped his head around, eyes darting toward the blinding light. Yuan Jinyi, heart-pounding, leaned forward on unsteady legs, desperate for a glimpse of what, or who, was still standing in the storm's heart. Yuan Jinyi's eyes went wide, his voice cracking in disbelief. How is this possible? No sooner had he spoken than a sharp crack echoed from the heart of the lightning array. One by one, the scattered sword beams began to intertwine, coalescing into a single, roaring river of light. But that was only the beginning. As the first torrent of blades formed, a second surged into being, then a third, until 5 separate rivers of blade light pulsed in perfect harmony. Charged by the crackling lightning, each river grew sharper, more refined, responding to Changsun Ming's every subtle command. She's really using Molong Academy's supreme inheritance to hone her swordsmanship?" someone murmured, barely daring to believe it. "Am I dreaming?" Another voice whispered in astonishment. The audience stood frozen, every pair of eyes locked on the spectacle. Then, with a graceful step that seemed to ride on the air itself, Changsun Ming ascended, the 5 blade rivers roaring to life around her. In a single devastating sweep, she shattered the killing array. The force of her attack sent Yuan Jinyi hurtling out of the ring. He tumbled to the ground, spitting blood, forced at last to concede defeat. All the spectators came to their senses at once, their eyes wide with shock as they stared at Changsun Ming, standing victorious in the ring. The geniuses from the other academies reacted even faster, shifting their gaze toward Luotian College, more precisely, toward where Ye Cheng sat. Their looks burned like coals, ready to leap from their sockets and consume him. "It seems Molong College's so-called supreme inheritance isn't all that," a voice sneered. "With such meek talent, how dare they challenge the might of Luotian College?" On stage, Changsun Ming could feel the intensity of their stares, especially the reverent looks aimed at his master. A thrill ran through him as he returned their glare, his eyes flicking toward the Molong College contingent, led by Lei Tian and their allied teams. He spoke then, his voice cold enough to freeze blood. "Don't flatter yourselves, a single win," he snapped, and the color drained from several challengers' faces. "Yeah, why get so arrogant over one victory?" another called out. "The 100 Academy War isn't decided yet." "Who made you the champion of this tournament?" a third jeered. A ripple of agreement rolled through the crowd as they laughed at Changsun Ming's disdain, unaware that the war had only just begun. A ripple of forced protests went up from the Molong students, and even a few faculty members, but their voices were hollow, like the quacks of a dying duck. No sooner had their ridicule faded than Changsun Ming's victory parade began. Having already bested Yuan Jinyi, he didn't pause. With Yuan Jinyi as his springboard, he tossed open challenges to the brightest prodigies of Dongxiao College, Tianying College, Yongqi College, and conquered them all in turn. By the final day of the 100 Colleges War, Luotian College stood unassailable, its name gleaming at the top of the leaderboard as the undisputed champion. Luotian College, Changsun Ming, Ye Cheng, and Dean Luo Li. The announcer's voice boomed across the arena. After today, these 3 will surely be celebrated throughout the Divine Dynasty. Bathed in a spotlight of roaring applause, Dean Luo Li, Ye Cheng, and Changsun Ming descended from the podium. Ye Cheng remained perfectly composed, his calm mask unshaken by the tumult. Beside him, Luo Li and Changsun Ming could barely contain their excitement. As a tide of Luotian students surged forward to congratulate them, Luo Li let slip the first genuine smile she had worn in what felt like ages. Her smile faltered as soon as she caught Shen Yue's awkward grin. In that instant, the headmaster of Luotian Academy, once stunned by the recent scandal, but now fully composed, turned to Shen Yu with unwavering resolve. His calm expression left no room for negotiation. "Shen Yue," he announced, "by my authority as headmaster of Luotian Academy, I hereby revoke your student status. You are no longer welcome here. Leave at once." What did you say?" Shen Yue's voice trembled with shock. Chapter 327, Shen Yue froze. "What?" She could scarcely believe her ears. This wasn't the wavering, gentle Dean Luo Li she'd always known. Even Ye Cheng stared at Luo Li in astonishment, admiration flickering in his eyes. Had the dean not spoken so decisively, he would have leapt forward to help clean up this mess alongside Luo Shen. But now that Luo Li had found her backbone, Ye Cheng felt a swell of approval. Luo Li met Shen Yue's incredulous gaze and spoke with unshakable firmness. "You heard correctly, student Shen Yue. Effective immediately, your ties to Luotian Academy are severed. We have nothing further to discuss." At last, Luo Li felt her thoughts clear. She'd been shaken by Yuan Jinyi's and Shen Yue's arrogance, but Changsun Ming's triumph and Ye Cheng's steady support had restored her conviction. To continue indulging Shen Yue out of pity would only bury her true potential and betray Luotian Academy and its loyal students. Shen Yue remained rooted to the spot, her face ashen. It wasn't until Dean Luo Li and the others turned and walked away that Shen Yue finally blinked, as if waking from a daze. Ye Cheng stood frozen, heart pounding, as the announcement registered in his mind. He had been expelled from Luotian Academy. Everything felt unreal. Just moments ago, he had believed in his chances. Now, that hope lay in ruins. Not far away, the Changsun family also emerged from the competition hall, their faces etched with disbelief and regret. Changsun Ming's display of talent had far outstripped their wildest expectations. Time after time, she had dominated every contest, and in the final trial she'd soared to first place, earning the title of Champion of the 100 Academies battle. Even those who had harbored envy, Lady Changsun and Changsun Ba, could only watch in silent awe, their jealousy dissolving into reluctant admiration. Changsun Lu himself was stricken with remorse. In the 100 Colleges War, achieving a ranking among the top 300 meant one thing: potential. Those selected could one day ascend to the lofty rank of Heavenly Venerable. But victory, the way Changsun Ming had stormed the trials, virtually guaranteed her advancement to Taoist Venerable status in the future. In the Yingyue Divine Dynasty, where a single Xuan Emperor ruled the heavens, Taoist Venerables were unrivaled powers, their favor jealously sought by the Empress herself. With Changsun Ming's triumph, the Changsun family stood poised to become the dynasty's premier Taoist house, an honor that would reshape their fortune for generations to come. Meanwhile, Ye Cheng retreated into the shadows of Luo Shen's ancient pines, the taste of failure bitter in his mouth. Though expelled, he vowed silently to himself, this was not the end, but the beginning of a fiercer, more determined path. The thought tormented Changsun Lu's heart. Their entire clan might have risen to the heavens alongside him, yet they'd wasted that chance, leaving one of the heavenly talents reduced to a stranger in his own home. How could he ever report this disgrace to the family's true leader, the Xuanzun ancestor, upon his return? A chorus of harsh voices snapped him back to reality. "Changsun Lu, halt right there!" He spun around. "What do you want?" His wife, Lady Changsun, stepped forward, eyes blazing. "My husband is the head of the family. How dare you elders address him by name?" Their son, Changsun Ba, bristled beside her. All three wore strained smiles, but their hearts pounded with unease. The senior elders, however, showed no respect. Their cold gazes swept over the younger couple. "Head of the family? Ha?" Without another word, one of the elders raised his hand. A jade-green talisman materialized between his fingers, rippling with a malevolent energy. A heavy pressure rolled off its surface, bearing down on Changsun Lu like an oncoming storm, an unmistakable warning that his defiantly empty title meant nothing here. "Apologies, but the ancestors' decree has just arrived. As of today, Ye Cheng is stripped of all titles and read, Usid to an ordinary clan member. Changsun Ba's position as young master is abolished. And you, Lady Changsun, are no longer part of the Changsun family. Return to your natal home at once." The Changsun patriarch's voice rang out cold and final. At his words, Ye Cheng and the others felt panic spike through their veins, followed by a rising dread they struggled to suppress. You can't do this. It's rebellion," Ye Cheng protested, his voice cracking. "I am the head of our branch. I've committed no crime. Ancestor has no right to dismiss me so." Before he could finish, the assembled elders sprang forward. They unleashed talismans of binding, spirit chains, snapping into place. In an instant, Ye Cheng, Changsun Ba, and Lady Changsun were overpowered, shackled, and thrown into a space-sealed confinement talisman. The elders' faces were etched with impatience and scorn. No fault? The notion was laughable. To sever a future Taoist master from his lineage, to turn him into an outcast, surely that was the gravest of offenses. Besides, the elder's voice cut through the tense hall, Miss Changsun Ming herself promised to aid your family once. But so long as Changsun Lu remains head of the clan, I doubt even she would lend you that favor. A cold smile curved on the senior's lips. You'd best return at once and await our ancestors' verdict. Changsun Ming and her companions left under a cloud of uncertainty, unaware of what had become of Changsun Lu and the others. Only Ye Cheng perceived the faint ripples of destiny shifting around them, but he could not afford to lose himself to their fates. Moments later, Ye Cheng stepped aboard the spirit boat at the docks of Xianxia City. As the vessel drifted away from the harbor, his eyes dimmed with inward focus. He closed himself off from the world and began to temper the purple qi coursing through every fiber of his being. Believing he was merely recovering from his grievous injuries, Luo Li, Changsun Ming, and the rest prepared a secluded chamber for him, ensuring absolute silence. Yet just as Ye Cheng settled into his cultivation, a sudden tremor ran through the deck, an unexpected disturbance that shattered the stillness of the night. Swish! Inside the secluded chamber of the spirit vessel, Ye Cheng's eyes snapped open. They crackled with an electric intensity as he gazed upward into the roiling sky. "So there are still some who want to die," he murmured, his voice as cold and sharp as frost. Below Xianxia City, the 100 Colleges War had just drawn to a close. One spirit boat after another lifted off, bound for its home academy. But scarcely had they cleared the lower cloud layers when the heavens themselves seemed to rebel. A titanic surge of spiritual power ripped through the sea of clouds, tossing the smaller ships like driftwood. Cultivators throughout the fleet cried out in alarm as their vessels pitched and lurched on the brink of tumbling back into the mist. Eyes darted everywhere until they settled on the cause of the upheaval. There, striding onto the very clouds, stood a figure in flowing purple robes. Around him, the pressure fluctuations of a late Saint Venerable bloomed unchecked, tearing the sky apart with raw, disordered Taoist energy. "Is that Vice-Dean Lei Tian?" someone whispered, voice trembling. Under the gaze of countless horrified cultivators, Vice-Dean Lei Tian surveyed the scattered spirit boats with a calm, almost disdainful expression. He raised neither hand nor weapon. His mere presence spoke volumes of the power he wielded. Back in his private quarters, Ye Cheng allowed a slow, knowing smile to curl at the corner of his lips. Perfect. This upheaval would draw out every reckless player who thought to challenge the line between genius and madness. And he intended to make sure they all learned exactly why nobody so far had walked away unscathed. He rose to his feet, a quiet resolve settling in his chest. Let them come. The real lesson was about to begin. For a time, this stretch of sky had been declared off-limits. No spear, boat dared approach. Standing at its center was a middle-aged man, Lei Tian, Vice-Dean of Molong Academy. "Luotian Academy, where is Ye Cheng?" His voice rang out like thunder, cutting through the stunned hush. Onlookers gasped in awe, but Lei Tian paid them no heed. His eyes burned with murderous resolve. He swept the heavens for the purple sails of Luotian Academy's spirit boat. In moments, he spotted Luo Li's vessel bobbing on the misty currents. With a single fluid step, he closed the distance and materialized before them, barring their passage. A lone figure in violet robes advanced, spiritual light crackling around him. He planted himself defiantly in front of the Luotian boat. Around them, cultivators and monks alike exchanged uneasy glances. None doubted what Lei Tian had come to do. In the tournament of 100 academies, Sun Ming of Luotian Academy stood unrivaled in renown. Yet in terms of disgrace, Molong Academy had suffered more than any other, surpassing even the first and second-ranked Yungqi and Tianying. Now its vice dean, Lei Tian's face flushed with fresh humiliation, confronted his proudest rivals at last. Vice Dean Lei's reputation had always been a thorn in Luotian Academy's side, especially now that everyone knew about his prized student Yuan Jinyi's scandalous past. As whispers spread through the top colleges, it was clear Lei Tian had come to pick a fight and settle a score. Vice Dean Lei, Luo Li called out, her voice slightly louder than necessary as she tried to draw the attention of the assembled instructors and students. If they were watching, Lei Tian might think twice before making trouble, but Lei Tian only smiled, his expression unruffled, his eyes cold. "What am I doing here to see Instructor Ye Cheng?" he answered, voice low and even. "It's very simple. I admit my students haven't reached his level, but I can still beat him." He paused, and a cruel smirk curved his lips. "I'm here to defend my student's honor. I challenge him to step forward and fight me. If he refuses, well, he'll have to live with the reputation of having run away." A hush fell over the courtyard. Luo Li's face paled, and the other instructors exchanged uneasy glances. Lei Tian's offer wasn't just a challenge. It was an open invitation to disgrace Ye Cheng in front of their peers. Now all eyes were on Ye Cheng, whether he would accept or surrender his hard-earned reputation. Many of the onlookers couldn't hide their pity as they glanced at the Luotian Academy contingent. Lei Tian's strategy, using sheer power to intimidate, was ruthless but undeniably effective. Ye Cheng, Luotian Academy's instructor, is in for a serious setback this time, they whispered among themselves. Shaking their heads, the cultivators agreed that defeat here would be disastrous. Molong Academy would waste no time publicizing today's events. The blow to Ye Cheng's reputation would tarnish the prestige of Luotian Academy's victory, rendering it all but meaningless. While the murmurs grew louder, a figure emerged from the captain's cabin. He strode out with calm assurance, a gleaming spirit sword hanging at his hip. Dark hair framed a face so striking that it stopped conversations mid-sentence, and his eyes, deep and swirling like distant galaxies, drew every gaze in the room. A hush fell, punctuated only by the soft rustle of robes and the quickened breaths of the female cultivators who couldn't help but stare. "Could that be Instructor Ye Cheng of Luotian Academy?" someone whispered. "Is he the one who challenged Cheng Sun Ming to lead in the 100 Academy battle?" A ripple of excitement spread through the crowd as they realized who this young man truly was, and that the outcome of this contest might hinge entirely on him. Chapter 328. Ye Cheng stepped out of the isolation chamber aboard the spirit boat. Luo Li and the other Luotian students rushed forward, anxious expressions on their faces. "Teacher Ye Cheng, don't pay any attention to Lei Tian's taunts," Luo Li urged. "Yeah, just ignore him," another student chimed in. They had all come to respect Ye Cheng and feared he might lose his temper and get hurt if he replied to the provocations. Luo Li even planted herself squarely in front of him, determined to stop him from rushing off. Lei Tian's lips curled into a sneer. He had two goals, to humiliate Ye Cheng and to force him into a public confrontation. If Ye Cheng simply backed away now, his plan would be only half accomplished. Stepping forward, Lei Tian mocked. "What's the matter, Coach Ye Cheng? Too scared to admit defeat face to face?" Ye Cheng finally raised his gaze. He met Lei Tian's challenge with a slight smile, serene and unruffled. Gently patting Luo Li's shoulder to calm her, he took a deliberate step forward, ready to confront his rival on his own terms. Ye Cheng's challenge hung in the air, crisp and unyielding. Under the astonished gaze of hundreds of cultivators arrayed around the cloud platform, he rose onto the mist-churning cloud and fixed his eyes on Lei Tian. His voice was low, but carried clearly across the distance. "Surrender to you, worthy?" Just 7 simple words, yet the words struck like thunder. A deadly silence fell. Then, as if a dam had burst, Lei Tian's eyes flared with rage. His lips curled into a cruel grin. "Very well," he thundered. "You want to admit defeat? I'll grant you your wish. Fight me, life or death, here and now. Do you dare accept?" A collective gasp rippled through the spectators. Even the Academy's highest elders, Hardened veteran cultivators who had seen untold battles turned pale at Lei Tian's inexorable decree. None had expected such uncompromising ferocity from the arch-sage. At the edge of the assembly, Luo Li's face drained of color. Ye Cheng's background was a mystery, his true power concealed. But Lei Tian? He was a legend among legends, an immortal cultivator whose name alone struck fear into rival factions. In Luo Li's reckoning, Ye Cheng stood virtually no chance of survival. Yet there he remained, calm and unflinching, the faintest glimmer of defiance in his dark eyes. The winds stilled. The cloud platform trembled under the weight of anticipation. What would Ye Cheng do next? End of chapter. Gu Dao, don't be rash. Dean Luo Li suddenly stepped forward, her voice low but urgent. Luoshan Academy can afford to lose a little face, just some hollow prestige. But with your talent, defeating Lei Tian later will be straightforward. There's no need to press him all the way now. Ye Cheng offered her a faint, confident smile. Rest assured, Dean, leave this to me. First we have the 100 Academies War. Don't you still believe in my strength? Dean Luo Li's eyes went wide. Before the war even began, Ye Cheng had promised her a surprise courtesy of Xianxia Ming. At the time, she'd laughed it off as a joke. Now, seeing the calm certainty in the young man she'd rescued from the great wilderness, she realized how badly she'd underestimated him. Her heart skipped a beat. Without another word, she bowed her head and stepped aside. At that moment, the gathered Yingyue disciples fell silent, countless pairs of eyes widening in stunned disbelief. A murmur of disbelief rippled through the grand terrace. Is teacher Ye Cheng really going to challenge Vice Dean Lei Tian to a life-or-death duel? Lei Tian is one of the Yingyue divine dynasty's most formidable saints. Gathered venerables from every academy had trained their eyes on Ye Cheng, but he remained perfectly calm. His face gave nothing away, his gaze drifting indifferently over the crowd before settling on Lei Tian. He offered the Vice Dean a faint, confident smile. A life-or-death battle? Very well, let's begin. Lei Tian's expression turned stormy, outraged that Ye Cheng dared not only to face him, but to let him strike first. He unleashed a roar and thrust a hand skyward. Instantly, vast spiritual energy rippled through the air. Inky lights and shifting shadows whirled around his palm, weaving together until, in a matter of breaths, a colossal scroll, nearly 100 feet long, materialized above them. The inked panorama sprang to life. Soaring walls, twisting alleyways, throngs of spirits and mortals, all rendered in razor-sharp detail. With a resonant boom, the painted city pressed down on Ye Cheng like a living force, its every street and spire staking claim on the battlefield. As the final strokes fell into place, Lei Tian's voice thundered across the air. Behold, the brush that births a world. Ye Cheng's heart pounded as he watched the spectacle before him. Another supreme inheritance of Molong Academy? He whispered in awe. They say if you master it fully, it can even evolve into a private realm. A murmur rippled through the gathered cultivators. That Saint Lei Tian may be ill-tempered, someone muttered, but his combat prowess is beyond comprehension. He's honed this killing technique to a peak few can imagine. Faces drained of color as top academy leaders exchanged fearful glances. Saint Lei Tian's ink and water scroll spread before them like a living painting. The ink swirled, the brushstrokes weaving an illusory cityscape that pulsed with oppressive energy. Anyone caught in its grip would not only feel their strength crushed, but their very minds begin to falter. If one could not withstand its onslaught, their soul risked being dragged into the painting's depths, trapped forever in a phantom world. There, their divine thoughts would be siphoned off, fueling Saint Lei Tian's power and making his scroll ever more formidable. As the misty outlines solidified into recognizable streets and towers, gasps rose from the crowd. Within that spectral city, several familiar figures appeared, figures whose fate now hung precariously in the balance of Saint Lei Tian's terrifying art. Evil titans, renowned adversaries of the Yingyue divine dynasty, and several powerful cultivators who bore long-standing grudges against Molong Academy had all been sealed within Lei Tian's mystical scroll of suppression. Now, bound as battle thralls and fueled by the scroll's repressive might, they served only one purpose, to swallow Ye Cheng's very essence into their prison. Lei Tian's voice rang out across the vast sea of clouds. This battle is concluded. Suspended amid the swirling mists, Ye Cheng stood perfectly still, his eyes unfocused and his posture slack. Observers exchanged anxious glances and shook their heads. "Has the scroll stolen his soul?" someone whispered. "I must go to him," Luoli cried, her heart pounding as she surged forward. But before she could take a step, a firm hand fell on her shoulder. "Dean, you need not intervene." Startled, Luoli looked up into the calm, confident gaze of Chang Sun-ming. He stood poised yet relaxed, every bit the picture of assured command. His eyes, however, were fixed not on her, but on the motionless figure of Ye Cheng above, filled with a quiet admiration. Luoli's defiance wavered. Chang Sun-ming's voice, low and unwavering, left no room for argument. "Trust me," he said, "he's not as helpless as he seems." She hesitated, torn between her duty as dean and the unmistakable certainty in his tone. Above them, the sealed masters strained to complete their devouring ritual. Yet Chang Sun-ming's steady confidence felt like the only bulwark against a fate worse than defeat. Footsteps echoed on the cloud pavement as Chang Sun-ming took a measured step forward, drawing on his own cultivation to counter the scroll's oppressive force. All eyes turned to him. The battle might have seemed over, but a single act of resolve could still tip the scales, and Chang Sun-ming was about to prove he was that resolve. Chang Sun-ming's eyes shone with unwavering confidence. Ever since she began her cultivation under Master Ye Cheng, she had felt the depth of his skill, so much so that even mastering a single move of his Bei Ming sword style had convinced her there was no rival to him. "Lei Tian is no match for my master," she declared softly. Luoli frowned. "Where does your certainty come from?" she asked, unable to hide her disbelief. "All you've learned is that one sword technique, and it's only a Daozun-level inheritance, according to the scroll left behind by the Xuan Emperor of Mo Long." Chang Sun-ming's smile widened. "So what if it came from Emperor Xuan?" Her voice dropped to a calm but powerful whisper, and the light in her eyes grew even brighter. "The technique Master taught me isn't just a Daozun-level move. It's not even an Emperor-level killing art. It surpasses them both." Luoli stared at her, stunned. In the last 100 Academy battle, Chang Sun-ming had indeed swept through the arena, wielding the Bei Ming sword style granted by Ye Cheng, and vanquishing dozens of Yingyue Academy's finest prodigies. Now, faced with Chang Sun-ming's unshakable certainty, Luoli could only swallow her doubts. In the climactic duel, Chang Sun-ming had unleashed the Bei Ming sword style with such ferocity that 9 soaring rivers of sword energy surged outward, each blade edge churning like a rushing torrent. Even Luoli, who'd faced the deadliest arts in the 9 provinces, felt her heart lurch. This display rivaled the most lethal Daozun techniques. Yet Chang Sun's own words echoed through her mind. What she'd just witnessed was still not the Bei Ming sword style's true pinnacle. Can it grow even stronger?" she whispered, incredulous. Her astonishment gave way to cold reason. At best, the Bei Ming sword style was on par with an imperial-level killing technique, only narrowly matching Lei Tian's famed assaults. How could mere sword energy surmount such a yawning chasm in cultivation? Just as hopelessness crept in, Ye Cheng made his move. Beneath the gasping gaze of every monk and onlooker, he burst skyward. A spirit-forged sword blazed in his hand, its runes flickering like starlight, as he dove straight for the colossal ink-painting scroll hovering above the sea of clouds. To every spectator, it looked like a suicidal plunge into the very trap set by the Daozun masters themselves. "He's done for," someone muttered. "There's no miracle left for him," another whispered, shaking their head. One by one, eyes drifted away, until, without warning, boom! A cataclysmic roar split the heavens. The void itself shuddered, and the clouds beneath the scroll billowed like a storm-tossed sea. In that instant, every gaze snapped back to the epicenter of power, hearts pounding with awe and dread. Ye Cheng's gamble was about to pay off, one way or another. Ye Cheng felt the spiritual energy of heaven and earth swell and surge around him, as if a vast abyss had awakened. He raised the spiritual sword in his hand and pointed it toward the ancient ink-painting scroll before him. Though his consciousness and spiritual power remained rooted deep within his dantian, supervising the refinement of the purple chi cauldron, the mastery of his sword force technique allowed him to command external energy without drawing on his own reserves. At once, the sprawling chi of the realm billowing like thunderous waves, answered his silent summons. Under the awed gazes of every cultivator in the arena, that raw energy coalesced into countless sword beams. They arced and intertwined, shifting and rolling like a boundless ocean of razor-sharp light. The air itself seemed to blur as sword intent rose in tidal swells, each flash of brilliance engulfing friend and foe alike. Heaven and earth trembled under the weight of the attack, the battlefield's boundaries all but erased. This is the true essence of the North Sea sword style? Someone gasped, voice thick with reverence. Ye Cheng stood unmoving at the storm's heart, the tip of his sword tracing patterns in the air as the spiritual energy surged. His expression was calm, eyes focused, his will alone steering the great flow, of sword chi. In this moment, he was not merely a cultivator wielding a sword. He had become the vortex through which all sword intent flowed, a living testament to the Beiming sword style's ultimate conception. Ye Cheng's mastery of the Beiming sword style erupted like a boundless tide of light, sweeping over mountains and rivers for thousands of feet. Lei Tian, the arrogant vice dean of the Molong sect, had only just activated his ink-painting scroll when that sea of sword chi crashed into him. In an instant, the scroll disintegrated into drifting ash, and the sword light pressed on, relentless. With a single, decisive stroke, Ye Cheng shattered Lei Tian's defenses and reduced him to dust. Vice Dean Lei Tian was no more. Chapter 329. Silence. Absolute, breath-stopping silence fell over the arena the moment Ye Cheng's figure drifted back to Luohan Academy's spirit boat. Like ripples from a stone tossed into still water, the stunned cultivators around him finally blinked awake. Eyes darted toward the boat. One by one, they sucked in cold, astonished breaths. Just a few days ago, Luohan Academy had been little more than a quiet backwater in the 100 Academy War, barely noticed among its illustrious peers. Then Changsun Ming had surged forward like a dark horse, toppling prodigies and claiming the championship. Now, a second marvel stood revealed, Ye Cheng. His swordplay, boundless and fathomless as the abyss, had cut through fear itself, slaying the vice president of Molong Academy, the contest's third-ranked school. In a competition dominated by titans, Luohan might never have cracked the top 3. Yet by this single, breathtaking victory, they had secured their seat among the tournament's elite 10. Luohan Academy is truly rising, murmured one veteran cultivator. Around him, whispers of awe spread like wildfire. Even the usually cool-headed Luo Li stared at Ye Cheng with undisguised reverence. In that charged moment, the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what this unassuming academy, led by 2 dark horse champions, would unleash next. Luohan Academy's decks hummed with excitement and disbelief. Until today, Changsun Ming had been hailed as a prodigy, but he was still young, never quite taken seriously by the great powers. Now, though, Ye Cheng's single, decisive strike had erased that doubt and more. He'd slain Lei Tian, a late Saint Venerable, in one blow. A few cautious voices rose among the crowd. Don't celebrate too soon, one elder warned. Molong Academy won't let Lei Tian's death pass without retribution. They still have several Dao Venerables on retainer. Nod after nod confirmed their unease. Luoshen's troubles weren't over. But whether they believed a counterattack was coming or not, everyone shared one conviction. Ye Cheng was in a league of his own. Slaying a late Saint Venerable single-handedly wasn't just cultivation level. It was raw, overwhelming combat power that left even veteran Saint Venerables looking up at him. Amid the murmurs, Ye Cheng strode back onto the awaiting spirit boat, as calmly as if he'd stepped off a carriage. He surveyed Dean Luo Li and the younger disciples, all still staring at him in stunned silence. With a playful half-smile, he said, "What's the matter, Dean? And you all can't even recognize me anymore?" Luo Li and the others blinked back to reality, their eyes lighting up with excitement as they looked at Ye Cheng. Changsun Ming was practically bouncing in her seat. "Master, I knew you'd win," she cried. Ye Cheng couldn't help but grin at her enthusiasm. He'd even picked up on the whispered encouragements between Changsun Ming and Luo Li during his duel with Lei Tian, but seeing the little girl so overjoyed still warmed him. He reached out to ruffle her hair and laughed softly. All right, your confidence has been worthwhile." Meanwhile, the spirit boat of Luohan Academy drifted back toward the mountain gate amid peals of laughter and celebration. On Molong Academy's vessel, however, a heavy silence had fallen. Its students stood as if at a funeral, none more stricken than Yuan Jinyi, whose face had turned ashen. Because Luotian's prodigies had thrown their rivals into disarray, Molong's top contender limped in at 27th place. Yuan Jinyi, in particular, had been defeated by Chang Sunming and lost half his victory points, dropping him into a humiliating position somewhere in the 80s. Needless to say, with this outcome, returning to Molong Academy unprotected by a tutor would spell certain punishment, and quite possibly a demotion in rank and resources. Until now, Yuan Jinyi and her peers never worried about that, because they had Master Lei Tian watching their backs. But with Master Lei fallen, panic has swept through the G group, none more so than Yuan Jinyi herself. Lei Tian had risen to defend her, and she'd felt invincible. Now, however, Master Lei was dead, slain by Ye Cheng. To make matters worse, Yuan Jinyi was decisively defeated by Changsun Ming, her ranking plummeting into the 80s. Back at Molong Academy, her prospects will be bleak indeed. Stripped of patronage, cast down in status, her future all but destroyed. Yet even that fear pales beside her deeper regret. Like every other cultivator present, she'd caught sight of Ye Cheng's swordsmanship, the legendary Beiming sword style. Its radiance was unmistakable. Even a novice could sense the power of its lineage. That single inheritance surpasses all of Molong Academy's so-called supreme killing techniques combined. With such a blade at his command, who could hope to challenge him? A month passed in the blink of an eye. At Luotian Academy, the 100 Academies tournament had come to an end, and word spread like wildfire that Changsun Ming, the Academy's golden prodigy, had claimed the championship. Even Molong Academy's best efforts to suppress news of Lei Tian's death at the hands of Ye Cheng couldn't stop the rumor mill. Luotian's prestige soared overnight, and eager youths from across the realm flocked to its gates, desperate for admission, and, above all, the chance to learn from Ye Cheng himself. Watching their excitement, Yuan Jinyi's envy boiled over. If only I'd stayed at Luotian from the start, she thought, her frustration reaching its peak. But Ye Cheng paid no heed to their petitions. His role as a mentor at Luotian was purely circumstantial. He was here only to await the maturation of the great Tao seed planted within him. He had no plans to remain indefinitely. After all, among these countless hopefuls, there might still be another talent as extraordinary as Shen Yue. Ye Cheng barely gave them a second thought, and simply ignored the courtier's whispers. Ever since returning to Luotian Academy, he'd been fully occupied teaching a handful of earnest students a new, simplified sword style. These were the same disciples who'd humbly sought his counsel in the spirit realm, students the rest of the academy had once laughed off as sycophants. In truth, their talent only stretched so far. They weren't ready for the lofty intricacies of the Beiming sword style, so Ye Cheng had crafted a more accessible form specifically for them. Within weeks, each of them had made tremendous progress, and with this small circle of sharpshooters around him, unsolicited petitioners dared not approach. At last, he could devote himself entirely to refining the purple chi cauldron of all living beings. Tonight marked the culmination of a month's labor. A soft hum filled his study room, vibrating through the jade tiles. In Ye Cheng's chest, something stirred, a tiny cauldron born of pure violet chi, its surface crystalline and aglow with divine radiance. As he focused his will, the cauldron slid free from his body and floated behind him, revealing itself in all its compact glory. At last, the purple chi cauldron stood complete, ready to transform the fate of any living soul it touched. The 100-foot-tall purple chi cauldron descended, exhaling a ghostly violet mist that writhed like living spirits. Ye Cheng didn't need to expend a drop of his own spiritual power. The cauldron's innate aura was enough to suppress and annihilate any foe. Against its might, ordinary emperors were no more than ants. Should he choose to unleash its full force, even quasi-saint-level adversaries would shatter under its crushing pressure. This is precisely what sets the purple chi cauldron apart from the heavenly destiny scroll. Nanshuan Shenzhou's destiny scroll can only shield its bearer and bolster combat prowess. It cannot strike out offensively. The purple chi cauldron of all living beings, by contrast, has absorbed the collective fates of the northern wilderness, rendering it a lifelong spiritual weapon in Ye Cheng's hands. A subtle shift in Ye Cheng's focus sent ripples through the air. Oh, knee by one, spectral blades materialized behind him. The 4 holy killing swords, once bound within the vermilion bird heavenly seal, reformed under his will into the fearsome immortal execution sword formation. A fierce killing aura billowed like steam as the purple chi cauldron of all beings crashed into the formation's center with a thunderous boom. Immediately, streams of lustrous, fate-woven purple chi spiraled out from the cauldron like divine light, weaving their way through every sword array line. Ye Cheng's eyes widened in astonishment as he watched the cauldron's power fuse seamlessly with his immortal execution sword formation. Before today, that formation alone was enough to fell anyone below saint rank. Now, bolstered by the purple chi cauldron's boundless destiny chi, its lethality had leapt to an even greater plane. With this, Ye Cheng whispered to himself, not a single ordinary saint stands a chance. Even more significant, the purple chi cauldron of all beings shared the same fate-drawing principle as Nanshuan's heavenly luck painting scroll. It absorbed and concentrated the fortunes of one's clansmen and followers to empower its master. As a supreme, ever-growing treasure technique, its true potential lay far beyond even his current grasp. Just as Ye Cheng basked in the cauldron's swelling blessing, a subtle shift in the air told him his trial was far from over. Meanwhile, just outside Luotian Academy, deep in a hidden thicket of ancient pines, Mo Qing crouched on a moss-covered rock and gazed toward the Academy's spiritual land, shimmering in the distance. Without looking back, he asked, "Are you certain there really are treasures there?" At his side, a low, eager voice replied, "Absolutely. If you'll cooperate, Vice Dean Mo Qing, we can claim them easily and split everything down the middle. With that kind of wealth, our cultivation would surge overnight." Had anyone from Luotian Academy seen them at that moment, they would have recognized the man beside Mo Qing at once, Xianxia, the once promising disciple whom Luo Li himself had expelled. Chapter 330. You were expelled by someone like Luo Li. Your words mean nothing. Mo Qingdu's tone was cold, his contempt barely concealed. Xianxia regarded him with a faint, knowing smile and spoke softly. Whether you choose to believe me isn't the issue. Vice Dean Mo, you ventured into the depths of the spiritual land yourself today. Don't you already know if I've been truthful? Her calm confidence struck him silent. He recalled how, following her tip, he had risked everything to enter the life-forbidden zone, its air seething with calamity fire. He had painstakingly explored its hidden caverns and emerged with a staggering discovery. Buried beneath that cursed terrain was a relic of unimaginable power, a supreme treasure that would stir even the Dao Zun to action. He was convinced that if the emperors of the realm learned of it, they would launch a full-scale war to seize it. The thought ignited an unquenchable fire in his heart. At the same time, he couldn't shake the chill he felt from Xianxia herself. On the surface, her cultivation seemed modest, but the ancient spirit, Kang Shui, residing within her, gave her an aura of invincibility that sent a shiver down his spine. With Xianxia and his disciple on my side, I might actually pull off this heist and claim the treasure for myself. Whether they intend to keep their word afterward is beside the point. First, Xianxia has already advanced me with a priceless inheritance, cultivation techniques that will carry me all the way to the Daozun realm. Second, I'm far from powerless on my own. I have formidable allies ready to back me up if the situation demands it. Even a leftover soul at the Xuan Emperor level poses no real threat. I'm confident I can suppress it. Xianxia and I agreed on the plan and moved at once. According to old Kang Shui's calculations, her spirit merged with Xianxia, half a month more, and the treasure's seal will break. So I slipped into hiding just outside the entrance to the spiritual land and settled in for the wait. From my vantage point, I could feel the hum of mystical energy pulsing through the barrier. What wonders or dangers had unfolded inside during my vigil, I could only imagine. But when the appointed time arrives, nothing will stand between me and that treasure. The heat was rising by the minute. A group of Luotian Academy students trudged toward the entrance of the spiritual expanse, eager to cultivate within its hallowed depths, until they were abruptly halted by one of the instructors. "Return at once," the teacher ordered, voice firm. Instructor Ye Cheng has decreed that no one may enter the expanse at present. A few students bristled, but this feels like the perfect time to refine our cores. It's his command. The instructor cut them off. No questions. At the mention of Ye Cheng's name, any lingering protest died on their lips. He was renowned throughout Luotian for his uncanny ability to sense the birth of an avenue seed, an event so rare it could reshape the fates of cultivators who stumbled upon it. Trusting his judgment, the students bowed and withdrew without another word. Nearby, Elder Kong Shui exchanged glances with her fellows. All of them could sense the surge of nascent power stirring beneath the expanse's surface, but even their combined perception paled beside Ye Cheng's. His readings were always more precise, his warnings more urgent. Master Gu, a Taoist cultivator, ventured as they regrouped beneath a stone pavilion. "Are you saying a seed of the Tao has formed deep within? Could it really threaten Luotian Academy?" Ye Cheng closed his eyes, as though drawing the answer from the expanse itself. When he spoke, his tone was calm but resolute. The birth of an avenue seed is both supreme boon and hidden menace. As it ripens, raw spiritual energies flare uncontrollably. If we leave the expanse's formations unguarded, that backlash could shatter our protective wards and pour devastation into the outer realms. He opened his eyes, steel blue and unwavering. That is why all disciples must remain outside until the seed's power stabilizes. When the moment arrives, I will perform the sealing rite to absorb its excess qi. Only then can we safely harvest its blessings. A respectful hush fell over the group. They understood full well the dual nature of an avenue seed, boundless potential, yet perilous if mishandled. Outside, the morning sun climbed higher, casting pale light over the silent barrier that now sealed the spiritual expanse. Within, the air trembled with anticipation. In 3 days' time, Ye Cheng would face the expanse's greatest mystery, and once more test the limits of human will against the chaotic Tao. Luo Li stared in astonishment at the vast expanse of spiritual land before her. She could sense the origin of the calamity fire flickering somewhere in its depths, an energy both baffling and inexplicably potent, but she had never once suspected that it might be tied to some legendary treasure. And yet, according to Ye Cheng's warnings, Luotian Academy itself could soon feel the tremors of whatever phenomenon was awakening below. Just as she struggled to piece together his cryptic words, Ye Cheng lifted his head and looked deep into the heart of the terrain. His voice cut through the tension like a blade. The time has come. Before anyone could react, a thunderous boom shattered the silence. A pillar of crimson light erupted from the ground, soaring skyward like a coiling dragon of fire. Its brilliance bathed the entire academy in an otherworldly glow, and a roar so mighty it seemed to crack the heavens rolled across the campus. Under the stunned gazes of teachers and students, the devastation that had been confined to the spiritual land's far reaches leapt outward. Flames, alive with an eerie intelligence, cascaded in torrents from the earth, consuming every shadow in their path. Within moments, the entire region was engulfed in the raging inferno of calamity fire. Luo Li's heart pounded. She glanced at Ye Cheng. His expression was calm, determined, yet tinged with a barely concealed excitement. Whatever treasure or spirit lay buried beneath this conflagration, it had finally made its presence known, and now there was no turning back. Deep within the raging conflagration, a crimson orb, like a nascent spirit seed, glowed with unearthly light, drifting amid the surging flames. The inferno within the spiritual realm teetered on the brink of breaking free, poised to engulf the entire Luotian Academy. "Everyone, fall back! Teachers and students, retreat at once!" At the sight of the flames lapping at the boundary of their sacred land, Principal Luo Li sprang into action. She cast aside her shock and any skepticism about Ye Cheng's foresight, and raced toward the heart of the blaze. At the same time, she barked orders to the other instructors, directing them to shepherd the students to safety. Even Ye Cheng's extraordinary combat abilities, formidable as they were, would barely slow a calamity fire of this magnitude. Luo Li's only hope lay in activating the Academy's ancient protective formation, the sole barrier capable of suppressing the Inferno's advance. Clutching the activation talisman, she sprinted toward the formation's control array, every step echoing with urgency. The fate of every teacher, every student, now depended on her reaching it before the flames could consume them all. Whoosh! A radiant arc of rainbow light suddenly blazed across the sky, freezing the frantic flight of Luotian students and instructors in mid-panic. "Look, Vice-Dean Mo Ching!" someone shouted. "He's come back to help." Every eye turned toward the figure stepping down from the divine arch. Relief brightened Luoli's features. She and Ye Cheng, even bolstered by the Grand Veneration formation, could scarcely hope to fully suppress the raging calamity fires. They needed every ally they could muster, but that hope evaporated in an instant. Mo Ching paid no heed to the cheers or warnings. With uncanny speed, he lunged straight toward the inferno. As he swept past Ye Cheng, he covertly unleashed a pulse of left divine energy. Buzz! The hidden strike struck Ye Cheng squarely in the side, sending him staggering off balance. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. "He's trying to shove him into the disaster flames." Outrage exploded around them. How ruthless! He'd betray his own sectmate? Teachers and disciples of Luotian watched, mouths agape, as Mo Ching pressed on toward the roaring fires, cold, determined, and utterly unconcerned with the chaos he'd sown behind him. Luckily, Ye Cheng didn't move an inch. He didn't even wrinkle his brow. Instead, a mischievous smile played on his lips, as if every one of Mo Ching's moves had fallen right into his trap. "This guy's weird," Mo Ching thought, tightening his grip on the hilt of his sword. He couldn't afford hesitation, not when the old woman of Kongshui had entrusted him with such a crucial mission. Summoning every ounce of spiritual power, he prepared a single, devastating strike. When his first blow failed to fell Ye Cheng, Mo Ching unleashed the rest of his energy in a brilliant, scarlet burst. In an instant, he became a streak of crimson lightning, plunging headlong into the heart of the calamity fire. From the outside, it looked as though he'd vanished. For a heartbeat, there was only silence, and then Mo Ching reappeared deep within the roaring inferno. He stood before the source of the conflagration, a pulsating orb of red light that seemed to contain all the fire's fury. In his hand, a faintly glowing blossom hovered, a red lotus whose petals shimmered like embers. It was the very spiritual plant the old woman had spoken of, its protective aura isolating him from the searing heat and allowing him to reach the orb's threshold in record time. Mo Ching's lips curved into a confident smile. "I've long been aware of the shifts in the spiritual land, and I've been preparing for them." He swept his gaze over the gathered Luotian instructors and disciples. Everything was orchestrated for today. Confusion rippled through the crowd. The teachers and students exchanged uneasy looks, anger flaring in their eyes as they tried to make sense of Mo Ching's revelation. Something about this simply didn't add up. Before anyone could demand an explanation, a soft, chilling voice echoed across the courtyard, cutting through the tension and silencing all murmurs. Under stunned gazes, Xianxia stepped out of the spatial spirit tool that Mo Ching held in his hand. But when she spoke, it wasn't the clear, youthful tone they knew. Instead, the words came in a raspy, ancient croak, like the voice of a centuries-old crone. A collective gasp rose from the Luotian disciples. They barely registered their shock before the true horror unfolded. The old spirit Kongshui had fully possessed Xianxua's body. With no warning, she forced Xianxua's frail form to its absolute limit, channeling every ounce of her power. The air around them crackled as Kongshui unleashed a surge of strength that none of them had anticipated, and none knew how to stop. Power surged through the academy, rippling outward like the presence of a great Taoist master. Every Luotian disciple felt it, a crushing weight on their chests that made each breath a struggle. Before anyone could stop them, Xianxia and Mo Ching joined forces. Cradling the Calamity Fire's treasured Dao seed alongside the Lihuo lotus, they stepped onto a swirl of clouds and vanished, leaving the others to face the raging inferno alone. "Shameless!" Luoli cried, grief and fury choking her voice. Xianxia didn't even look back. In her mind, Kongshui Xuandi's astonished proclamation still rang clear. "A Dao seed! Ha-ha! My disciple, your luck is extraordinary. You've uncovered such a treasure, and it's of the fire element, perfectly attuned to my Lihuo lotus. Together, we will forge the supreme Dao foundation, master and disciple alike." At those words, a fierce excitement ignited in Xianxua's heart, her spirit dancing with eager anticipation. For a moment, Luoli was so focused on her master's promise that he would forge the supreme Tao foundation for both teacher and student together, that she didn't even notice the fierce greed burning in the eyes of the Kangshui Xuandi remnant soul lurking in her mind. Nor did she see how differently Mo Qing was thinking. When Luoli spoke, Mo Qing sneered. "You deserve every bit of this, you insolent fool. If you'd obeyed me from the start, you wouldn't be in this predicament now." He laughed mockingly, then glanced back at the spreading calamity fire with a cruel thrill, eager to watch it consume the entire Luotian Academy, and Ye Cheng along with it. But the instant he turned, Mo Qing froze in midair. "It seems I overestimated myself," he murmured, stunned. "Only 2 or 3 of you actually recognize this treasure." From below, Ye Cheng offered a faint, confident smile. Before Mo Qing could recover, Ye Cheng had already stepped onto a drifting cloud and soared upward. Far off in the sky, an endless sea of calamity fire, powerful enough to dye the imperial realm in new colors, raged without so much as a flicker in Ye Cheng's eyes. He simply lifted a hand, and the roaring blaze obeyed his will. In an instant, the vast inferno coalesced into a single orb of dancing red-gold flame. Without hesitation, he drew it into himself, letting its fierce energy become his sustenance. Chapter 331. How is this possible? Mo Qing's shout rang out in disbelief as the raging inferno abruptly collapsed inward, vanishing as though Ye Cheng had swallowed it whole. His eyes went wide, his voice cracking with fear. In the distance, Shen Yue and the ancient spirit Kang Shui, whose essence resided within Shen Yue's body, hovered, frozen in midair. It wasn't until Ye Cheng's unflinching gaze swept over them that the two snapped out of their trance. "Run, now!" Mo Qing screamed, tapping into every last scrap of spiritual power in his dantian. In an explosive surge, he rocketed away, covering nearly 1,000 feet in seconds. Hope flickered in his chest until he dared to look back. There, standing silently in his path, was Ye Cheng. The young swordsman's figure was calm and resolute, his blade leveled. Mo Qing's heart stuttered as he realized there would be no escape. Without warning, a sliver of radiant sword light shot forward. It cleaved through Mo Qing's protective aura, struck his throat, and felled him where he stood. The Xuanzun's eyes rolled back, and he crumpled to the ground, dead. A stunned hush fell over the gathered teachers and disciples of Luotian Academy. First, the cataclysmic flames that threatened to engulf the entire campus had been extinguished at Ye Cheng's command. Now, in the span of a heartbeat, he had dispatched a formidable Xuanzun with a single, flawless strike. All around, hearts pounded. Whispers spread through the ranks. He actually did it. Ye Cheng's composure remained unshaken, but in that silent moment, every witness understood that they had just witnessed the rise of a true master. Then, in a breathtaking instant, the seemingly invincible Vice Dean Mo Qing fell beneath Ye Cheng's blade, an outcome no one in the hall had anticipated. Very few had witnessed Ye Cheng's earlier assault outside Qingqian City, nor his duel that claimed Mo Long, so this final stroke sent a wave of stunned silence across the assembly. Ye Cheng paused beside Mo Qing's broken form, dark eyes gleaming with quiet amusement. As he knelt to examine the corpse, he detected a faint, unfamiliar aura entwined in the shattered bones. It was a hidden seal, an emergency safeguard designed to bind Mo Qing's soul even after his body was destroyed. The flesh was gone, but the spirit had not dissipated. It lay imprisoned in the wreckage of its former vessel. Rather than cleaving through that seal immediately, Ye Cheng crouched back, intrigued. At that moment, Shen Yue, who had been circling overhead, hovered to a halt. She watched in disbelief as Ye Cheng absorbed that blazing remnant into himself. Rage, humiliation, and bitterness warred in her eyes. Above all, she resented him for hiding his true strength so long. If he had revealed even a fraction of his power earlier, she would have leapt at the chance to become his disciple. Instead, today's disaster lay squarely at his feet. Shen Yue's thoughts churned with bitterness. If she'd spent those months training under Ye Cheng, perhaps she, rather than that insufferable Changsun Ming, would have claimed the crown at the 100 Academy tournament. It was all Ye Cheng's fault, she told herself. Yet now, as she stood before him, her movements were eerily composed, her eyes shadowed by equal parts fear and determination. And then, without warning, she sank to her knees in front of Ye Cheng, the soft thud echoing through the hush that fell over Luotian Academy's students and faculty. Everyone who knew Shenyu understood how unthinkable this was. Her pride was legendary. When had she ever knelt to anyone? But Ye Cheng's presence was something else entirely. Calm, unshakable, almost ethereal. Who could remain haughty in his shadow? Who dared to challenge him now? He neither acknowledged nor condemned the stunned gazes all around. To him, this moment was no spectacle. To Shenyu, however, every second in that position intensified her humiliation. And yet, recalling the covert agreement she had forged with Emperor Kongshui Xuan, she felt a flick of triumph beneath her shame. Outwardly, she appeared broken. Inwardly, she counted the seconds until her true plan could begin. Even now, despite her reputation for scorn, her mind remained sharp and fiercely loyal only to herself. Emperor Kongshui Xuan was no exception. The Lihuo lotus he'd entrusted to Shenyu concealed a deadly secret, a hidden backdoor designed to bind the soul of anyone daring enough to refine it. No matter how much Ye Cheng masked his true power, at this moment barely on par with the Xuan Emperor, he couldn't escape that hidden mark. Crafted by the founder of the soul-snatching sect, the legendary soul-snatching Heavenly Emperor who once dominated Yingyue and dozens of neighboring divine dynasties, once implanted, the mark could enslave even a Saint Emperor's soul. Realizing the peril she'd unleashed, Shenyue's attitude shifted instantly. Bowing low, she retrieved the Lihuo lotus and the fire path seed, holding them out before Ye Cheng with trembling hands. "I was blind to your strength and have grievously offended you. Please forgive my arrogance," she pleaded, her voice thick with contrition. "I offer you these two treasures in full repentance. Spare my life, and I will serve you faithfully for all my days." Her words rang with genuine fear and respect, leaving no doubt of her desperate sincerity. Ye Cheng didn't budge, not a hint of surprise on his face as he regarded the Lihuo lotus and the Huoxing Dao seed Shenyue proffered. A faint smile curved his lips. "Is that really all you have to offer?" he asked, voice deceptively casual. Shenyue's heart pounded so fiercely she thought it might burst. She trembled, then gritted her teeth and nodded. I truly surrender. I have nothing else." "All right, then you're free to go." Ye Cheng inclined his head as if dismissing a mere annoyance. But in the very next instant, a silent explosion of force radiated from his outstretched palm. Shenyue's eyes flew open in horror as an invisible pressure slammed into her mind, expanding painfully at the center of her consciousness. She watched, stunned, as the remnant soul of Emperor Kongshui Xuan, her ultimate trump card, hidden deep within her sea of consciousness, was drawn out and dissolved by Ye Cheng's power, as effortlessly as plucking a feather from the wind. "No, this can't be," Shenyue gasped, but the remnant soul was already gone. Her greatest defense had failed her in a single, devastating moment. "How powerful are you?" Shenyue's voice trembled with awe and dread. Regret and terror warred in her eyes as she instinctively tried to break free, only to find there was no escape. In a single, swift motion, Ye Cheng had seized her, drawn out Emperor Kongshui Xuan's lingering soul, and refined it, even stripping away the mark embedded in the Lihuo lotus. Before Shenyue could utter another word, the residual force of Ye Cheng's soul-refining technique exploded through her mind. Her sea of consciousness shattered, her soul utterly annihilated, and her lifeless shell crumpled to the ground. "She's dead?" someone gasped. The assembled cultivators stood frozen, not simply at Shenyue's sudden demise, but at the sight of the faint, quivering wisp suspended in Ye Cheng's palm, the last vestige of a Xuan emperor's soul. Even as a mere remnant, it should have radiated a heaven-shaking pressure. Yet in Ye Cheng's hand, it hovered no more potent than a dying ember. In the blink of an eye, Ye Cheng shattered Mo Qing's defenses and absorbed every scrap of his inherited skills and secret lore. It took barely a few breaths before Ye Cheng's form emerged from Mo Qing's body. The onlookers, who had been frozen in stunned silence, finally blinked and rubbed their eyes, first in confusion, then in outright astonishment. A sudden rush of wind heralded the expelled spirit of Mo Qing. It spiraled free from beneath his brow and hovered before Ye Cheng, its eyes alive with urgency and resentment. "Ye Cheng," Mo Qing snarled, lips twisting with equal parts fury and disbelief. "I never imagined you'd outmaneuver me, but don't think you can finish me off so easily." With that, Mo Qing produced a yellow talisman and held it aloft. Instantly, a sovereign aura flared around it, crackling with imperial qi, an energy branded with the very name Yunqi. "I'm destined to die soon anyway," Mo Qing declared, his voice steadier now, tinged with a bitter pride. "I'm the illegitimate son of the Yunqi Taoist patriarch. The old master regards me as a disgrace and has forever barred me from returning to Yunqi's halls. So go ahead, try your worst. I have nothing left to lose. But if you kill me, he'll come after you with everything he's got." The twin talismans, Yunqi and Imperial Power, glowed in perfect harmony above Mo Qing's chest. Every onlooker held their breath, not just the ordinary disciples of the Luotian sect, but even Luo Li and Changsun Ming, Ye Cheng's closest friends, exchanged anxious glances. From below, the gathered sect members pressed their palms together, their suppressed energy rippling toward Mo Qing. His lips curled into a triumphant smile. Just as Mo Qing prepared to boast of his lineage and achievements, Ye Cheng lifted a single hand. 2 fingers extended, brimming with translucent light that coalesced into a slender blade of pure sword qi. Qi? The bite of that silent slash was sharper than thunder. It tore through the air, struck the Yunqi divine talisman, and cleaved it in 2. Not only did the talisman shatter, but the faint echo of Mo Qing's soul, entrusted to the talisman's protection, was instantly annihilated. In the stunned silence that followed, no power remained to stand against Ye Cheng's calm gaze. The battle was over. So much nonsense. Ye Cheng spoke quietly as he raised his hand. In an instant, Mo Qing's corpse disintegrated into ash. He then descended lightly to the ground, drawing shocked stares from Luo Li and the other Luotian disciples. Their mouths hung open as they struggled to process what they'd just witnessed. Calmly, Ye Cheng asked, "Now, who among you can explain exactly what that Yunqi Taoist was up to?" A low murmur rippled through the crowd. It took them a moment to collect themselves, but when clarity returned, a single impression filled every mind. Ye Cheng was utterly and terrifyingly domineering. Chapter 332. Taoist Yunqi is a living legend of the Yingyue divine dynasty. In under a century, he mastered the Daozun perfection realm, and by his own efforts elevated Yunqi College from a mid-rank institution into the #1 academy in the entire dynasty. Yet for over 10 years, his whereabouts have been shrouded in mystery. Many assumed he had fallen in battle or passed away, but the imperial aura, still radiating from the Yunqi divine talisman, proves otherwise. He not only lives, but his power continues to grow at an astonishing pace. Even the mighty cultivators of the Xuan Emperor realm are said to be outclassed by his strength. "So that's the connection?" Ye Cheng murmured, eyes narrowing as he pieced the clues together. When the truth sank in, he gave a measured nod. "In that case, I'll pay Yunqi College a visit in a few days." A hush fell over the Luotian teachers and students gathered around. "Visit Yunqi College?" one of the instructors echoed, brows knitting in confusion. "What's the point of going there?" Ye Cheng met their puzzled gazes calmly. "To learn more about Taoist Yunqi, and to see if we can claim that power for ourselves." His tone was cool, but the resolve in his eyes left no room for doubt. Ever since Ye Cheng's unstoppable display in the last battle, everyone at Luotian Academy had been convinced he'd never deign to shake hands with the Yunqi Taoist. Teachers and students alike were dumbfounded when he did exactly that. None more so than Luo Li and Changsun Ming, who exchanged bewildered glances. But Ye Cheng barely spared them a second thought. He'd claimed the Lihuo Lotus and the Fire Dao Seed, and every fiber of his being buzzed with anticipation. How would his cultivation leap forward once he refined these treasures? 3 days later, deep within the Academy's spiritual domain, the sky itself seemed aflame. Great crimson clouds rolled across the heavens, casting everything below in a warm, ruby glow. Perched on a billowing cloud sat Ye Cheng in full lotus, concentric rings of golden light pulsing around him like a rising sun, far more dazzling than any sunset. A tremendous roar shook the air, and the swirling divine mist parted as if in obeisance. The chaotic energies that had raged moments before calmed to a gentle hum. Then Ye Cheng's eyes, bright as molten gold, slowly opened. He rose to his feet, every inch of his being thrumming with newfound power. The Lihuo Lotus had been absorbed without a trace, and the Fire Dao Seed within him was blossoming, its essence weaving seamlessly into his core. A faint halo of flame danced around his form, heralding the transformation of his Tao body. In that moment, Ye Cheng knew he stood on the threshold of a new realm of strength, one that would shake both friend and foe to their very souls. Ye Cheng's cultivation level was still perfect Dao Zun, but the surge of his spiritual power had grown several times stronger than before. A crackling energy surrounded him as he tightened his grip, faint crimson veins pulsing along both his arms. The ambient fire spirit, the primordial flame that hovered between heaven and earth, awoke at once, gathering enthusiastically without any need for him to activate a skill. With a mere thought, he could unleash the burning heaven divine flame to consume any foe in his path. This dramatic enhancement was a direct result of refining the Fire Avenue seed. Already, his talent in the fire path surpassed that of many Golden Fate prodigies. Yet what thrilled him most was the new fate he had unlocked by perfecting that seed, the 6 paths of reincarnation, classified as Red Grade 1. 6 paths of reincarnation, Red Grade 1. Description: this is the first stage of a divine body with immense growth potential. By fusing additional avenue seeds, the body's grade, and thus its power, increases. If raised to its peak, this divine body can rival even the legendary chaotic body. Armed with such a fate, Ye Cheng knew his true journey was just beginning, and that his future might one day place him among the immortals themselves. Note, each time you fuse a new avenue seed, the difficulty of fusing the next one doubles. Seeds fused so far. 1. Ye Cheng watched in awe as the imprint of the 6 paths of reincarnation formed within him, the very first divine body he had unlocked, its potential stretching out to infinity, on par with the legendary chaotic body. Such a destiny was a shock even to him. A subtle pulse stirred in his mind's eye, and before him materialized the map he'd extracted from the soul of the dying old woman Kang Shui. According to her final whispers, this was the divine treasure trove the soul-stealing patriarch had discovered in his prime. It had once belonged to a peerless emperor, and at its very heart lay a single divine Tao seed. Legend held that fusing this seed would massively amplify one's divine consciousness and the power of thought itself. For centuries, the soul-stealing patriarch had risked everything to penetrate this treasure domain, determined to use the Tao seed to create a perfect vessel, one worthy of his soul's return and the rebirth of his broken lineage. Now, with the 6 paths divine body awakened and the map unveiled, Ye Cheng felt that he stood on the threshold of a transformation no mortal had ever achieved. Rumors at last began to stir. The legendary divine treasure would not awaken until more than a decade after its benefactor's death. Word traveled fast through the courts of the Yingyue divine dynasty. It was said that Madame Kang Shui had chosen Shen Yue as her heir precisely because the treasure's awakening site lay within Yingyue's borders, no distant land, but right at their doorstep. Yet before she could embark on that fateful quest, Shen Yu would first have to pay a visit to Yunqi College. Meanwhile, during his secluded retreat, Ye Cheng had accomplished far more than simply tending his Tao seed. With the purple chi cauldron of all living things now perfected, he had shattered every barrier between himself and the vast northern wilderness. His cultivation speed doubled overnight, and in short order he refined the great Tao seed to full maturity. Even as his personal power grew, Ye Cheng found time to extend his influence across the northern wilderness. He humbled the once proud Luotian Academy and brought its masters and disciples into allegiance under his banner. At the heart of that academy stood the twin Golden Fortune children, Changsun Ming and Luo Li, whose combined blessings sent torrents of auspicious purple qi coursing into Ye Cheng's cauldron. Enriched by their luck, his cultivation surged ahead still further, propelling him ever closer to unimagined heights. Ye Cheng's cultivation speed today was more than 50 times what it had been back in Nanxuan. If it weren't, he never could have absorbed in just a few days the very same great Tao essence seeds that would take an ordinary Tao master months or even years to refine. He owed Luotian Academy a debt of gratitude. By accepting it as his vassal, he had implicitly promised to shield and uplift the school. In return, its rising prestige and good fortune would flow back to strengthen his purple chi cauldron of all beings. At the same time, the soul-stealing ancestors' map had only given a rough location for the ancient Lu Emperor's tomb. Scouring that vast area on his own would take far too long. If Ye Cheng could bring Yunqi College, Yingyu Divine Dynasty's top institution, under his sway, its resources and manpower would speed the search immeasurably. Resolved, Ye Cheng ended his meditation, stepped out of the spirit realm, and called for his disciple, Luo Li. Pressing an elixir into her hand, he said, "Drink this now. It will help you unlock your heavenly moon body talent ahead of schedule." Luo Li's eyes shone with excitement as she accepted the gift. With Luotian Academy secured and a powerful ally in Yunqi College on the horizon, Ye Cheng's path to the ancient Liu Emperor's resting place and the unimaginable secrets it held lay wide open. After briefing her on his plan, Ye Cheng rose with quiet grace and drifted off toward Yunqi College. The instant the news reached her, Changsun Ming couldn't stay still. "Dean, why are you sending Master off alone?" she cried, anxiety tightening her chest. Still recovering from her recent retreat, the young girl paced back and forth, her face pale with worry. Although Ye Cheng had already brought all of Luotian to heel, Changsun Ming stubbornly insisted on calling him Master rather than His Highness, a small act of homage she could no longer indulge in now that fear had taken over her heart. She respected him deeply, but everyone in the Yingyu Divine Dynasty knew the fearsome reputation of Yunqi Taoist. He was about to set foot in the very stronghold of his greatest rivals, far from any allies. What if they reactivated their mighty formation? Could he possibly overcome such a trap alone? Luo Li saw Changsun Ming's distress and laid a calming hand on her shoulder. She drew in a slow, steady breath. "Don't worry," she said softly. "Master Ye Cheng's skill and insight far outstrip any formation they might muster. The moment he steps onto their grounds, their defenses will crumble before him." Changsun Ming's eyes flickered with doubt, but Luo Li's quiet confidence began to soothe her unease. Together, they watched as Ye Cheng disappeared into the misty distance, each heartbeat echoing the slender hope that he would return victorious. How could I not be concerned? Before Changsun Ming could finish her sentence, Luo Li pressed a small, glowing pill into her hand. Changsun Ming's eyes widened. "What is this?" The pill radiated a faint azure light that pulsed with Ye Cheng's unique spiritual aura. Instantly, she recognized it as the very elixir her master had just refined. Yet even more astonishing was the immense imperial qi emanating from it, a force so overwhelming, so majestic, it felt like a mountain bearing down on her. In that moment, the imperial energy from the Yunqi divine talisman that Mo Qing had displayed earlier seemed no more than a speck of dust. Intermediate imperial grade, an elixir fit for the heavenly emperor realm? "Master," Changsun Ming whispered, voice trembling, "you actually refined something of this caliber?" Deep within the spiritual realm's heart, in a secluded chamber of Yunqi Academy, a group of senior disciples had gathered. Their eyes were fixed on the pill in Changsun Ming's palm, and murmurs of astonishment filled the hall as they tried to comprehend the true power it contained. After 10 years of meticulous preparation, the moment has finally arrived. A murmur spread among the venerable masters of Yunqi Academy as they peered intently at the massive formation in the center of the grand hall. Divine light poured from the array, bathing a sealed, forbidden treasure box in an otherworldly glow. Under that radiance, the box's ancient seals cracked one by one until, with a resounding shatter, it burst open. An exquisite jade pendant shot upward, its surface still shimmering with residual spiritual energy. 2 archaic seal characters flared into view on the jade Gu Liu, casting a palpable thrill through every elder present. The Academy's finest bowed their heads in awe, for those 2 words had not appeared in a millennium. Chapter 333, The Tomb of the Ancient Emperor. Liu has become the obsession of more than just the soul-stealing ancestor. As one of the few human emperors ever to rule the wildlands, Emperor Liu's legacy is shrouded in myth. No wonder every major power, Yunqi Academy, Tianying Academy, Molong Academy, and even the Yingyue Divine Dynasty's royal family has long hunted for his resting place. In recent years, the quest finally bore fruit. Tianying, Molong, the Yingyue royals, and a handful of other factions each uncovered one of the 4 summoning tokens needed to unseal the tomb. Today, Yunqi Academy secured the final token. With all 4 emblems finally assembled, every condition for opening Emperor Liu's tomb has been met. The venerables of Xianxia Academy are positively brimming with excitement. After centuries of legends, the imperial inheritance of a long-lost human emperor now lies within their grasp. And best of all, none of their rivals can match their strength. The most formidable cultivator any other faction can field is merely a perfect Dao Zun. By contrast, Xianxia Academy's powerhouse experts stand leagues above that level, making them supremely confident as the moment of unveiling approaches. Even the Yingyue royal family only sent their matriarch this time, not the empress herself. A murmur of excitement rippled through the assembly. But from Xianxia, the dean has come in person. Outside, everyone believed that Dean Xianxia had disappeared over 10 years ago. What they didn't know was that back then, he had secretly broken through to the Xuan Emperor realm, and since then his cultivation has reached the late Xuan Emperor stage. Once we arrive at the imperial tomb, the Xianxia elders whispered eagerly, with our dean here, Emperor Gu Liu's inheritance will be ours. Even if the empress herself shows up afterward, she won't be able to overturn the result. They pictured the treasure trove of imperial relics and the glory that would be theirs. Their hearts pounded at the thought, until a low, resonant hum rolled through the back of the hall, snapping them from their daydreams. From a hidden chamber, one unknown to most Xianxia disciples, surged a wave of pressure, laden with true imperial might. The elders' excited chatter died on their lips. All of them looked toward that alcove, faces awash in awe and reverence. With a soft creak, the concealed door parted. A solitary figure rose smoothly into the air, radiating a presence so commanding it silenced the entire hall. In unison, the Xianxia elders fell to their knees and bowed their heads. "Your Majesty," they intoned, voices trembling with respect. "We welcome the Academy Master back from retreat. Very well, rise." The hall fell silent at the soft, even voice, devoid of joy or anger. Moments later, a middle-aged man in simple Taoist robes descended on a drifting cloud and landed gracefully at the center of the chamber. His expression betrayed nothing, until his gaze flickered ever so slightly at the sight of the ancient Liudi tomb token in the waiting disciple's hand. Yet he barely paused to study it. "Before you depart," he said calmly, "send word to Luotian Academy at once. Inform them that those responsible must come here to Xianxia and present themselves with an apology. If they refuse, though I will spare their lives, they have no place remaining within Yingyu Divine Dynasty." A murmur rippled through the assembled Xianxia masters. The master's tone was serene, yet his decree carried unmistakable weight. Since the conclusion of the 100 Academy War, Luotian Academy had shed its former obscurity, earning renown across the entire Divine Dynasty. Xianxia's senior leaders, in particular, bore fresh memories of the battle. Several of the Academy's most promising students had fallen to Changsun Ming's blade. Their grudges ran deep, and now their revered Academy Master had publicly demanded that Luotian's transgressors present themselves, or else be cast out of the dynasty forever. The gravity of the order settled over the hall like a gathering storm. No one dared question it. Though Xianxia Academy held the top spot among the 100 academies, their pride was bruised by Luotian Academy's recent provocations. Yet, bound by custom and respect, they couldn't strike back on a whim. Ever since Luotian had bested them in the 100 Academies War, the elders at Xianxia nursed both their wounded honor and a burning desire for retribution. Still, before they could devise a fitting response, their own dean rose to speak. No one fully understood what Luotian had done to enrage him so deeply, only that, as Master Xianxia had warned, Luotian's foothold in the Yingwei Divine Dynasty would be precarious at best. "What a pity," one venerable sighed. "Luotian has only just earned its name among the academies, and already its downfall seems inevitable." A venerable bowed and accepted the dean's decree, a bittersweet mix of regret and satisfaction tugging at his heart. He turned to leave Xianxia's hallowed grounds, but before he could step outside the spirit barrier, a sudden disturbance rippled through the air. Swish! A brilliant beam of spiritual light pierced the clouds, and an immense wave of energy swept across the entire academy. "Who dares to trespass upon?" A thunderous voice cut off, booming with righteous fury. Professors and students alike froze in place. Shock and indignation flared across their faces as they all looked skyward, straining to see who would dare challenge the preeminent Xianxia Academy. As the figure exhaled that sudden wave of spiritual energy, countless female students and teachers found themselves staring in rapt awe. "Who is this Taoist?" they whispered to one another. "Where did he come from, and why is he so powerful? Could someone be using our Yunki Academy's name to bully others?" Several teachers cast icy glares at the handful of students they already suspected of causing trouble. Those pupils paled at the accusing looks, their foreheads slick with nervous sweat. Just as the tension threatened to snap, a calm, resonant voice drifted down from the swirling clouds overhead. "Where is Taoist Yunqi?" The voice belonged to Ye Cheng, his form still cloaked in mist, but his words carrying an unmistakable spiritual authority. In an instant, his voice echoed through every corner of Yunki Academy. Students and instructors alike froze, exchanging startled glances. Those same female teachers and girls who had just been dazzled by his display now found themselves blinking in surprise, their admiration tinged with a new, curious respect. After all, it wasn't every day that someone dared to unfurl such potent aura within Yunki's sacred halls. Yet here he was, already commanding attention and demanding to know the whereabouts of their most esteemed master. The moment he spoke the dean's name, it echoed across Yunki Academy's training grounds like a declaration of war. Outraged shouts rang out. "Who dares invoke our dean so brazenly? Young man, you've gone too far." A cluster of male instructors, long jealous of Ye Cheng's effortless charisma and the trail of admiring female teachers and students that always followed him, seized the opportunity. With hostile glares, they reached for their weapons, intent on capturing him on the spot. High above, deep within the spiritual realm, Yunki's senior masters emerged one by one, robes fluttering as they hovered in midair. Their eyes blazed with anger. A Daozun realm vice dean stepped forward, recognition flashing across his face. "So it is you, Ye Cheng, instructor of Luotian College. There's never been ill will between Yunqi and Luotian. Are you here to start a war with us?" A stunned murmur swept through the crowd. "Ye Cheng, he really is here." "Ye Cheng? Yeah, the same man who trained Changsong Ming. Isn't he the one who single-handedly drove Luotian College to first place in the 100 Colleges tournament?" At this revelation, the faculty and students of Yunqi College stared at Ye Cheng with widening eyes. Few of them had actually attended the tournament, but they'd heard his name mentioned more than once, and they'd all been dying to see what this fabled gold medal instructor looked like in person. No one expected him to be so young. Perched on the cloud terrace above them, Ye Cheng remained perfectly composed as their murmurs swirled around him. He smiled and turned to the vice dean, who'd been the first to address him. "So you say there's no grudge against me? Then how do you explain the rumors that you plan to lead a punitive expedition against Luotian College?" A hush fell over the assembly. The vice dean's confident facade flickered for a moment, and even senior Taoist Yunqi, who'd only just voiced that very plan, grew pale. Ye Cheng's tone was cool, almost teasing, but his questions struck straight to their concealed ambitions. Now all eyes and all suspicions were fixed squarely on Yunqi College's leadership. Originally, he'd dismissed Luotian College, and Ye Cheng in particular, as minor players. No matter how talented, they were mere juveniles, unless they could ascend to emperor. He'd been sorely mistaken. "I never imagined this little Yingyu divine dynasty could harbor such a formidable dragon. Yet, fellow Taoist," the dean of Yunqi Academy spoke, stepping from the shadows for the first time, "you slew my worthless son without so much as an explanation. Do you think that proper?" The instant his words fell, an immense pressure, like the final, unbridled might of the late Xuan emperor, exploded outward. It swept over every hall and courtyard, rolling through the assembled cultivators like a gathering storm. Parents gripped their children, instructors froze mid-step. All eyes turned as the dean advanced, his robes billowing in the sudden gale of his aura. Teachers and students alike stared in awe and disbelief. "The old man, the dean, he hasn't fallen," someone whispered. Then came the stunned realization. "He's reached emperor level." Excitement crackled through the academy. The fearful respect once reserved for Ye Cheng now shifted to the dean himself. But when they turned back to Ye Cheng, their expressions were no longer timid. Instead, they bristled with a chill resolve, as though witnessing a rival sharpen his blade at the peak of its edge. The balance of power at Xianxia Academy had just shifted, and nothing would ever be the same. By now, everyone believed they'd pieced the story together. The dean's only son had clashed with Ye Cheng and been slain by him. Even if the young man had been in the wrong, who in their right mind would think the dean would let that pass? "Explain yourself," demanded the Taoist of Xianxia, stepping forward. Ye Cheng met his gaze without a flicker of fear. A slow, confident smile curved his lips. "I'm happy to explain," he replied. "But first, do you even dare to hear it?" Xianxia Taoist let out a cold snort. Cautious by nature, he'd always avoided making irreparable enemies. Even after exiling Luotian Academy from the Yingyue Divine Dynasty over an illegitimate child's death, he'd stopped short of blood vengeance to preserve a sliver of goodwill. Yet, Ye Cheng's insolence irked him. "So be it," he said. "Since you're so eager, fellow Taoist, let's see what tricks you've got." Ye Cheng inclined his head once, then raised a single finger to tap the empty air before him. A faint ripple of energy hummed up from the ground, as though the world itself trembled at his touch. Suddenly, the air before them rippled like the surface of a still pond disturbed by a single drop. Waves of swordlight fanned outward, each gleaming strand spiraling toward the center until they merged into a single, brilliant beam. In an instant, the radiance solidified into a slender sword talisman that drifted down and hovered inches from Xianxia Taoist. "This is my decree," Ye Cheng said in a calm, confident tone. "Will you accept it?" A stunned silence fell over the gathered teachers and disciples of Xianxia Academy. They exchanged baffled glances. Surely this was a joke, a mere sword talisman? Did he truly believe the Academy lacked its own sword cultivators? Some even snickered behind our hands, certain the young instructor had lost his mind. Xianxia Taoist's face darkened. With a scowl, he reached out, determined to grasp the talisman and expose the charade. But the moment his fingertips brushed the artifact, a surge of power flooded his senses. His expression froze, his shoulders slumped. Then, with a soft thud, he dropped to one knee on the misty clouds beneath him. Gasps echoed through the assembly. Teachers, students, even the venerable elders alike. The formidable Xianxia Taoist, feared by all, now knelt in humble submission before Ye Cheng. Ye Cheng dropped to his knees, forehead grazing the cold stone floor. His voice shook as he spoke, every word laced with desperation. "I, Ye Cheng, once the prodigal heir of a humble junior sect, have insulted you gravely and deserve nothing less than death. I beg your mercy for both myself and my disciples. From this day onward, Xianxia Academy swears fealty to you alone. We will never betray your trust. Should we break this oath, may our cultivation be destroyed, and may the heavens strike us down without pity." Silence reigned in the hall. Then a single stunned breath escaped the senior disciple standing before him. Chapter 334. A hush fell over the chamber. Every disciple stared in stunned silence at their master, Xianxia Taoist, who was kneeling on the ground, his face pale with disbelief. Xianxia Taoist belonged to the generation of the Xuan emperors, unmatched in strength throughout the entire Yingyue Divine Dynasty. Even the Empress stood on equal footing with him in terms of cultivation and martial prowess. And yet here he was, reduced to begging for mercy by Ye Cheng's sword talisman, and he had just sworn a life oath. To ordinary practitioners, phrases like, "May my Tao be severed," or "May heavenly calamity strike me down," were no empty threats. Such words carried the weight of the cosmos. Once spoken, the great Tao itself took notice and bound the oathmaker. That a powerhouse like Xianxia Taoist would utter them, everyone found it impossible to comprehend. Before they could fully absorb this shock, a low rumble stirred the air. From the far horizon, a column of radiant energy shot skyward, flooding the 10 directions with blinding light. Thunder crackled as if the firmament itself had been rent apart. Every cultivator above the venerable level paused, sensing a disturbance in the heavenly currents. Heads turned in unison toward the towering pillar, their expressions a mix of awe and dread. Ye Cheng stood on the Academy's eastern terrace, his heart quickening as a towering pillar of divine light shot into the sky. Now that its origin was revealed, every cultivator's eyes in the courtyard gleamed with excitement. It's the ancient Lu Tu mansion appearing," someone breathed out. The ancient Lu Tu mansion was the legendary sepulchre built by the ancient Liu Emperor himself, containing treasures and arcane legacies amassed over centuries. Such an imperial inheritance was priceless and perilous if it fell into the wrong hands. For decades, the supreme sects of the Yingyue divine dynasty had pooled their wisdom and resources to triangulate the tomb's hidden location. Now, at last, their efforts bore fruit in this dazzling eruption of divine light. Xianxia Academy's senior masters exchanged triumphant looks. Only the jade pendant token they guarded held the Emperor's true seal, the sole key to unlocking the mansion's inner sanctum. Without it, they could scavenge only the surface relics scattered around the burial grounds. Of course, breaking the pendant's ancient ward had not been easy. Xianxia Academy had poured in its own reserves, called in favors from allied sects, and drawn upon long-forgotten spells just to neutralize the curse woven into its jade. But the risk was worth it. Once the token activated the final barrier, the untold riches at the core of the tomb would be theirs to claim, and shared equally among all who had stood by Xianxia Academy in its hour of need. Ye Cheng took a steadying breath. This was the moment he had trained his whole life for, to step inside the Emperor's tomb, face whatever trials lay within, and seize the legacy of an age-stone sovereign. The pillar of light still pulsed before him, and with it the promise of unimaginable power and the trials that would test his very soul. Everyone's share ultimately depends on their own strength, and Xianxia Academy, under the leadership of the Xianxia Taoist, was clearly best positioned to claim the lion's share. Yet when Ye Cheng stood tall before them, even the venerable elders of Xianxia Academy froze in their tracks. None dared take a single step. They stood in terrified silence, as though awaiting divine judgment. Still, Ye Cheng didn't press his advantage too hard. He knew the Xianxia Taoist to be level-headed and harboring no dark schemes against Luotian, especially after the Taoist had sworn his life oath. More than anything, though, Ye Cheng's attention was drawn to the sudden appearance of the ancient Lu Tomb mansion. "Well, what a coincidence," he murmured. With that, he eased his gaze back to the kneeling Taoist, who dared not even look toward the newly revealed tomb. Ye Cheng's voice was calm as he said, "Very well, I see you've kept to your wits about you. Let's move on." "From now on, you will obey Luotian Academy," Ye Cheng declared, his voice ringing like a blade being drawn. He summoned the Sword of Light and darted toward the ancient Lu Tomb mansion. Dean Xianxia, ever perceptive, needed no further guidance. With a graceful bound, he rose into the air and vanished in a burst of rainbow-colored afterimage, leaving the courtyard eerily still. The professors and students of Xianxia Academy slowly came to their senses. In the center of the gathering, Dean Xianxia knelt, his legs trembling. Alarmed, they surged forward to support him. "Dean, what happened?" a deputy dean blurted, confusion written on his face. All eyes turned to the kneeling master. Feeling the worried gazes of his disciples, Dean Xianxia inhaled deeply. Without a word, he extended his hand. A wave of spiritual force swept outward, propelling the errant sword talisman back into the Academy's protective formation, where it settled neatly among the others. In the Yingyue divine dynasty, Dean Xianxia's talent was renowned, and his fortune almost legendary. Over 10 years ago, Ye Cheng stumbled into the Xuan Emperor realm by sheer accident. There he discovered an Emperor-tier treasure, and with it, a legacy of martial techniques and a near-forgotten killing formation whose power once rivaled that of a heavenly emperor. Although neither Xianxia Taoist nor the fledgling Xianxia Academy possessed the strength to restore this formation in full, they managed to rebuild enough of its core to hold off ordinary Xuan Emperor-level attackers. At its heart, however, still lay power equivalent to a heavenly emperor's might, meaning that any truly formidable foe would have to break this formation before setting foot inside the academy. Now, as the Xianxia Taoist elder prepared to activate their defensive array against an incoming Xuan Emperor assault, something unexpected happened. A single sword talisman, shimmering with inner light, tore through the air and struck the enemy formation. The barrier, which had previously shrugged off every onslaught, shattered like fragile glass. Even more astonishing, the talisman did not simply pass through, it fused directly with the formation's residual energies. In that instant, the runes on the talisman flared to life, and the very nature of the formation trembled. Friend and foe alike watched in stunned silence as the mingled powers of the sword talisman and the ancient array began to reshape themselves into something altogether new and infinitely more dangerous. Boom! An overwhelming pressure, far surpassing even that of Yunki Taoist by untold magnitudes, erupted from the formation. Invisible sword chi rippled and danced through the void, forming a shimmering dome above every teacher and student at Yunki Academy. Beneath its glow, they felt safe, but only so long as they remained motionless. The moment anyone dared act rashly or target Ye Cheng, the very same sword chi would strike without mercy, piercing skulls and ending lives in an instant. This, a single sword symbol, has wrested control from a heavenly emperor-level killing formation, murmured one instructor, voice quivering with disbelief. Across the courtyard, faces turned pale as teachers and disciples exchanged stunned glances. Their hearts pounded like war drums. They'd never witnessed such a thing. Yunki Taoist watched their reactions with a faint, rueful smile. Seized control? Hardly, he thought. If it were that simple, Ye Cheng wouldn't have forced him into this position so swiftly. There was something far more profound at work. Following Yunki Taoist's gaze, everyone's eyes settled on the floating sword array. The ethereal blades coalesced into a majestic formation that pulsed with untamed power. Each sword symbol glowed with its own inner light, yet together they moved as a single, living entity, responsive to their bearer's slightest intention. In that moment, awe rippled through the ranks of Yunki Academy. They realized that Ye Cheng hadn't merely overridden their great master's formation. He had awakened a higher art of sword mastery altogether. And under that azure dome of sword chi, even the most seasoned cultivators felt the weight of true supremacy. As the current master of this killing array, Ye Cheng had already witnessed its full destructive potential the moment he first activated the inherited memory woven into its diagram. Yet that recollection only reflected the array's original power. Now, after fusing it with the sword talisman, its killing force had grown incomparably greater. Where on earth had Luotian Academy unearthed such a prodigy? Before Taoist Yunqi could even finish his astonished exclamation, a thunderous commotion rose at the entrance to the ancient Liu tomb. News of the tomb's sudden appearance had summoned every powerhouse in the Yingyue divine dynasty, all racing here in record time. But the instant they arrived, their mounting excitement was snuffed out like a candle in a storm. In the center of the clearing stood a massive Qiang building. From its walls, divine light pulsed in a 1,000-foot radius, and intricate Taoist sigils intertwined across its surface, sealing and safeguarding the tomb within. Ye Cheng stood on the fringes of the divine light formation, where banners snapped in the wind and monks in every imaginable vestment gathered beneath them, their auras rippling like restless seas. He barely had time to take it all in before snippets of shocked conversation broke out around him. "That's Xiao," a voice hissed. "Head of the 3 vice presidents of Sky Eagle Academy. They say he's reached the late Daozun stage, and that he even carries a trace of Azure Dragon blood. No perfected Daozun would dare underestimate him." "Over there," another breathless whisper pointed. "Under the black flag? Aren't those the other 2 vice presidents of Molong Academy? And is that the director himself, the one who's been in seclusion to break through to the Xuan Emperor realm? Has he really come out?" A third voice chimed in, trembling with excitement. "Even the Grand Elder of Mingyue sect is here." "And look," someone added, "that's Hua Yuejiao, Commander-in-Chief of the Yingyue Guards, a true Daozun perfection." Murmurs and exclamations rippled through the crowd. Most of these cultivators had arrived hoping to fish in troubled waters, eager for any advantage they could seize in the chaos to come. When Ye Cheng and his companions reached the entrance of Qianglu, all hope of slipping in unnoticed evaporated at once. They found 4 of the realm's greatest powers already standing guard, sealing off every approach. Ink Dragon Academy, Sky Eagle Academy, the Yingyue Imperial Guards, and most daunting of all, the ancient Mingyu sect. Each of these factions commanded legions of elite cultivators. Should they choose to press the matter, they could summon multiple Daozun-level veterans, even Daozun perfects, to reinforce their lines. But it was Mingyue sect's presence that truly chilled Ye Cheng's spine. As the sole independent sect within the Yingyue divine dynasty, Mingyue predated the royal family itself. When the empire later reorganized its great cultivator schools into academies, Mingyue alone retained its venerable status, answering to no one but its own hierarchy. Today, however, only a single master from Mingyue had appeared. Still, this disciple represented the weight of the entire sect. In the great hall behind him sat 2 supreme elders, 2 deputy sect masters, and the sect master himself, 5 Dao Zun perfects who would brook no insult to their honor. Who among mortal men, Ye Cheng thought, would dare strike at the mouth of a tiger and live to tell the tale? With every exit blocked by transcendent masters, any attempt to breach Xionglu now would be tantamount to suicide. Ye Cheng's jaw tightened. He'd have to find another way in, or leave empty-handed. Disperse, disperse. With the big families working together, none of you stand a chance. A crowd of casual cultivators who had arrived full of hope now shuffled their feet in dejection. Most of them were already packing up, ready to go home. Of those who lingered, only 1/10 still wore the hopeful glow they'd had upon arrival. They muttered among themselves, but their complaints carried no weight with the assembled powerhouses. The elite disciples from the 4 great families barely spared them a glance. Their eyes were fixed instead on the looming Xionglu tomb mansion ahead. Just then, a shifting pattern of divine light flared across the tomb's entrance, and a low hum of repulsive energy washed over the crowd. Frowns deepened. "What's taking Xianxia College so long?" demanded one of the family elders, voice low and dangerous. "They were supposed to deliver the jade pendant that lets us into the core chamber. Without it, we can't proceed." In truth, the 4 clans had forged an alliance with Xianxia College weeks ago. The 5 factions had planned every detail of this tomb raid, breach the outer area, secure the pendant, then press on together to divide whatever riches lay inside. But now that pivotal jade token remained undelivered, and without it, no one dared challenge the tomb's defenses. A tense silence fell. The cultivators glanced nervously at one another, their last spark of optimism flickering out. Far above them, the divine light array shimmered, guarding secrets that only a jade pendant could unlock. And until that key arrived, even these mighty families could do nothing but wait. Chapter 7. A Delayed Token. Ye Cheng stood by the window, the pale light of dawn filtering through the screen behind him. His dark robes fell in neat folds around his ankles as he folded his arms, eyes fixed on the courtyard below. "My men have already reached out to Xianxia College," he said, voice low but urgent. "We should have a reply any moment now." He shifted his weight, waiting. A brief rustle of silk announced the arrival of his attendant. The man bowed. "My lord, the reply has come." Ye Cheng's heart thudded. "Tell me." "They report an unexpected complication within Xianxia College," the attendant said carefully. "It seems internal affairs have arisen, and they require several more days before they can dispatch the token." A flash of anger crossed Ye Cheng's face. He pressed his fingertips to the sill, steadying himself. "Several days? What are those people thinking? We have no time to spare." He turned on his attendant. "Contact them again immediately. Make it clear that this token is essential. Our mission hinges on it. They must send it by tomorrow at the latest." The attendant bowed again. "Yes, my lord. I will send word at once." Ye Cheng inhaled and released it slowly, composing himself. He smoothed his robes and allowed only the faintest crease of impatience to linger in his expression. "Good. Once you've sent those instructions, return and report directly to me. No excuses, no delays." The attendant slipped away, leaving Ye Cheng alone with his thoughts. Outside, the garden lay still, as if holding its breath. He pressed a hand to his chest, feeling the steady beat of his own resolve and the weight of the days to come. If Xianxia College didn't act swiftly, everything they had worked for could unravel, and Ye Cheng would not allow that to happen. Chapter 335. Xianxia Academy found itself in an unexpected bind. An unannounced visitor had appeared at their gates, forcing the Academy to postpone both the transfer of the Jade Pendant and the long-planned expedition into the ancient Lu tomb. In the audience of powerful cultivators, lips curled into sneers. Dark clouds of displeasure gathered in their eyes. Although Xianxia Taoist had been in seclusion for more than a decade, his whereabouts completely hidden, the Academy's reputation remained sterling. Beyond the Patriarch himself, several vice-deans boasted impressive cultivation, and the killing array he left behind was a formidable deterrent. Even the mighty Mingwei sect dared not provoke Yunqi Academy lightly. So what kind of uninvited guest could compel them to abandon a project that had been in preparation for years? Their story is a sham, Cheng declared coldly. As vice president of Molong Academy and a genuine Dao Zun, his cultivation ranking even above Lei Tian, his voice rang through the hall. They're simply looking for an excuse to delay us, hoping to drive up the price for that pendant. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. No one doubted Cheng's words. Yunqi Academy's masterstroke would not be so easily derailed. Yet the question remained, who truly stood at the Academy's threshold, and what power could they wield to make even Yunqi's elders hesitate? Ye Cheng, even in the early stage of Dao Zun, was still one of the greatest powers in the Yingyue divine dynasty. Now he addressed the senior masters of Yunqi Academy with uncharacteristic bluntness, and though his words stung, many in the crowd found themselves nodding in agreement. Let's face it, he said, voice steady. Yunqi Academy's scheme is cunning. Once this tomb manifests in the void, if they choose not to show, we'll be left circling its perimeter like aimless scavengers. We'll simply watch the time window close, see the tomb vanish back into nothingness, and we'll have squandered our only chance. A low murmur rippled through the assembly. Elder Yun of Yunqi Academy stroked his beard. We can't just give up, he muttered. The tomb, once born, will linger for at least a month. They claim they can reach us in no more than 3 days. We can afford a brief wait. The Grand Elder of the Mingyue sect nodded, his tone as cool as steel. Emboldened by his support, the Deputy Dean of Molong Academy straightened his robes and squared his shoulders with renewed resolve. Then, without warning, the humid air above the tomb shimmered. A soft whoosh sliced through the silence as a brilliant, rainbow-hued streak of light hurtled toward the ancient ruin. Every cultivator present tilted their heads skyward, eyes wide with astonishment. Look at that. The Mingyu sect, Molong Academy, Sky Eagle Academy, and another top power, 4 mighty forces clearly staking their claim on this imperial tomb, and here comes someone bold enough to crash the party? Who is this lone cultivator? Scoffed a bystander. No matter how high his cultivation, charging in by himself is nothing but bravado. A plainly dressed cultivator raised his thumb in mockery. All around, independent practitioners exchanged uneasy glances as a rainbow-hued aura, Ye Cheng's descent, plunged toward the tomb's ceiling formation. They all resented the Mingyue sect and its allies for trying to monopolize the site, but they had to admit, against these 4 great factions and their rumored ally, Yunqi Academy, they were powerless. And this Ye Cheng stood utterly alone. Barely more than a youth in appearance, he might be some hidden ancient, but to face these giants single-handedly? In their eyes, it was pure madness. The assembled cultivators formed an unbreakable cordon around the Qianglu tomb, leaving independent practitioners with no hope of forcing their way through. The independents exchanged uneasy glances as a rainbow skiff bore down on the tomb's entrance. The Mingyue sect's enforcers, along with the other guardians ordered to bar any outsiders, scowled at the approaching vessel. Only the Yingyue guards maintained their composure. Huayue Jiao and her friends had privately argued in favor of admitting independent cultivators, but their voices carried too little weight among the allied families. Now, to everyone's surprise, the outsiders pressed on regardless of the hostility. Huayue Jiao's dark eyes sparkled as she spotted the lone figure standing at the skiff's prow, Ye Cheng, his robes fluttering like a banner. Ye Cheng and his companions are right, she murmured, admiration shining in her gaze. Even if he isn't the strongest, his courage deserves respect, Huayue Jiao murmured, her eyes narrowing in genuine interest. In the next instant, a brilliant arc of rainbow light burst through the sky, dropping straight into the heart of the barrier formation. As the luminous haze dispersed, it revealed a lone figure, Ye Cheng. A collective gasp rose from the audience, especially among the young female cultivators. They whispered excitedly, not merely because of Ye Cheng's striking bearing, but because he looked so astonishingly youthful. To all appearances, he was more a brilliant upstart than a hidden veteran. Who is he? How dare he show up here? One onlooker hissed. A mere youngster challenging the 4 great sects? What an insult to their prestige, scoffed another. Ordinary disciples stared with wide eyes, their disbelief palpable. Even Hua Yuejiao's intrigue grew more intense, a curious gleam dancing in her gaze. Before anyone else could speak, a cold, familiar voice cut through the chatter. Fascinating. Ye Cheng, I never expected you to have the nerve to come here. You really think no one can kill you, Mo Long? The moment the words echoed through the air, Deputy Dean Chen Sheng of Mo Long Academy, still fuming from his earlier accusation that Yunqi Academy was nothing but a band of mercenaries, descended gracefully on a drifting cloud, landing directly in front of Ye Cheng. His eyes gleamed with unmistakable hostility. At once, the gathered cultivators snapped out of their stupor. All eyes turned to Ye Cheng, filled with awe and newfound respect. He's the ace coach from Luotian Academy, someone whispered, and his disciple just won the championship at the 100 Academies tournament. He single-handedly slew Mo Long's vice dean Lei Tian. Can you imagine his power? Even if he hasn't reached Dao Zun, he must be a perfect Saint Master by now. A young cultivator, voice trembling with excitement, added, and look at his face, so youthful, clearly under a century old. A Saint Master younger than 100 years. Such prodigy, he rivals the heirs of the greatest Taoist sects in the Outer Lands. As murmurs of astonishment rippled through the crowd, Chen Sheng's glare never wavered. He studied Ye Cheng with a mixture of contempt and caution, fully aware that underestimating this young coach could prove fatal. Yet for all the whispers and fear, no one dared challenge his bold approach. After all, Ye Cheng's reputation alone was enough to silence any would-be provocateur. The crowd around them murmured with barely concealed excitement, each whisper adding weight to Chen Sheng's already darkened mood. His eyes flicked to Ye Cheng, hostility simmering in their depths. Just then, Commander Hua Yuejiao's calm voice cut through the tension. Deputy Dean Chen, before us lies the entrance to the ancient Liudi tomb. If you feel compelled to spar with Brother Ye Cheng now, so be it, but let's not take this too far. Once we're inside, Mo Long Academy will still have its chance. Save your complaints for then. Her words stung like a blade. Chen Sheng felt the murderous aura coiling around him loosen as he forced it under control. Humph, he replied coldly. Commander Hua's silver tongue is as sharp as ever. He did not attack. He knew better than to underestimate Ye Cheng. No one truly understood the man's strength. Swallowing his pride, Chen Sheng cursed Lei Tian in silence, blaming him for dying so needlessly at Ye Cheng's hands and sullying Mo Long Academy's reputation. Today, at least, patience would be his weapon. Chen Sheng had been driven back by Hua Yuejiao's advance. Unfazed, she rose from the battlefield's edge and strode toward Ye Cheng with purpose. Taoist Ye Cheng, she said, bowing slightly, I've heard your name many times. Why not join us in exploring the tomb? Together, we can uncover its treasures. She offered a concise overview. This emperor's mausoleum is built on 2 levels, the outer passage and the inner sanctum. The only way into the core chamber, the inner sanctum, is with a special token, which Yunqi Academy currently holds. At her words, Ye Cheng's brow tightened. He chastised himself inwardly. If only he had asked the Yunqi Taoists to bring that token before setting out. Seeing him hesitate, Hua Yuejiao's lips curved into a reassuring smile. Don't worry, Taoist Ye Cheng, she said. Even though Yunqi Academy has the token, we have other means to secure our entry. Hua Yuejiao studied him thoughtfully. Although the emperor himself laid down the formation around the core chamber, the centuries, no, millennia, have taken their toll. Its power has dwindled to nothing more than a Saint-Emperor-level array. We may not be able to shatter it outright, but we can certainly disrupt it, scatter its wards, and send the treasures within flying. Yunqi Academy knows this. They might nudge the price up a bit, but they won't demand the moon. She paused, startled by the sudden light in Ye Cheng's eyes, the moment she mentioned the formation's weakened state. Chapter 336. Only a single formation protecting it, and it's merely at the Saint Emperor level. Ye Cheng's eyes flickered with surprise. When Hua Yuejiao first explained the situation, he'd assumed the tomb's core was sealed without even a token to breach it. But now he'd learned there was just one formation in place. At his cultivation level, even a flawless Emperor-level barrier would be trivial to dismantle. Without another thought, Ye Cheng vanished in a flash, diving straight into the Qianglo tomb mansion. Fellow Taoist, don't worry. No matter how strong the formation, it can be shattered with the Yunqi Academy token. Fellow Taoist? Hey, are you there? Hua Yuejiao's warning died on her lips as she stared after him, her eyes wide with shock. Chen Sheng and the others blinked in astonishment, utterly taken aback by his reckless boldness. This kid actually thinks he can shatter a Saint Emperor-level formation? I've met plenty of people who overestimate themselves, Chen Sheng sneered, but never anyone so completely oblivious to his own limits. He and the other Malong Academy officials exchanged amused glances. They weren't at all worried that Ye Cheng would accidentally overload the formation and bring down the ancient Liu Tomb mansion. After all, he was just one man. No matter how powerful he claimed to be, what real threat could he pose? Instead of fretting over disaster, Chen Sheng went on, voice rife with mockery, why not place a bet on how long it takes Instructor Gu to recognize his own folly? The rivalry between Malong Academy and Ye Cheng ran deep, and the Academy's leaders seized every opportunity to belittle him. Now was no exception. Chen Sheng turned toward Commander Hua Yuejiao, his tone dripping with derision. Commander Hua, you've put so much faith in this instructor. You must have your own prediction, right? In the Yingyu Divine Dynasty, the royal family's authority was absolute. Over the centuries, every major cultivation sect, save one, had been absorbed, stripped of its autonomy, and rebranded as an academy under direct imperial control. Only the storied Mingyu sect retained its independence, but even it bowed to the laws of the throne. Chen Sheng, a Taoist master of considerable talent and reputation, chafed under those very restrictions. Though he enjoyed privileges that ordinary cultivators could only dream of, he was still far from wielding the kind of unchecked power that overlord sects enjoyed in other dynasties. Every policy, every promotion, every mission, even those he initiated, had to pass through the royal bureaucracy. His frustration was shared by the leaders of the other great academies. None of them relished the loss of their old prerogatives. For years, the Mingyue sect's pride and transcendent standing had shielded it from direct interference. But now the royal court was tightening its grip. Hua Yuejiao, scion of the Mingyue line and commander of the elite Yingyue guards, found herself squeezed on all sides. Wealthy nobles and ambitious ministers alike whispered of her wealth, her influence, and the legendary power of the sect she led. Sensing an opportunity, Chen Sheng convened with the high-ranking Molong officials, officers who owed their stations to palace favor, yet still hungered for the old days of sect supremacy. They would present their move as an act of loyalty to the crown, they reasoned, but in reality, it would serve as both a grim reminder and a reckoning. This was the moment they had been waiting for, a chance to represent the royal family's might while settling old scores with a proud sect that had once overlooked them. In the shadow of the imperial capital, a quiet storm was gathering. Loyalties would be tested, alliances forged, and when the dust settled, the balance of power in the Yingyue Divine Dynasty would never be the same. Chen Sheng's jeers rang in her ears as Hua Yuejiao's smile faltered. A rush of frustration and regret swept over her. Had she known what kind of man Ye Cheng truly was, she never would have pressed to recruit him, but she'd had no choice. On paper, 5 premier factions were set to explore the ancient Latum. In reality, however, apart from Yunqi Academy, whose loyalties remained uncertain ever since their dean vanished, Mingyue sect, Molong Academy, and Tianying Academy had long since allied. Only the Yingyue guards stood apart. In such a lopsided lineup, securing any extra edge was vital, and finding someone as unpredictable and potentially powerful as Ye Cheng had seemed like a boon. Drawing a slow, steady breath, Hua Yuejiao forced herself to meet Chen Sheng's gaze. Don't worry, Commander. This isn't your fault. It's just Ye Cheng's arrogance got the better of him. The masters of the Yingyue guards rushed forward to support Hua Yuejiao. At their comforting words, she felt her composure returning. She drew a steady breath, ready to order her troops to ignore Chen Sheng's taunts, conserve their energy, and hold their ground until reinforcements from Yunqi Academy arrived. Then they would strike with everything they had. Before she could give the command, a thunderous roar tore through the air, as if a dragon's cry had been unleashed across the 9 heavens. In that instant, a tide of imperial qi, vast and deep as the ocean, erupted from the Qianglu Tomb mansion surging outward like a bound beast finally freed from its chains. And beneath that roar came a shattering crack, the sound of a grand formation collapsing. "Impossible! The formation's broken?" someone gasped. Xianxia and his companions, who had been sneering at Ye Cheng only moments before, stood rooted to the spot, their mockery evaporating in shock. Huayue Jiao and the other Yingyue guards hesitated for just an instant, then, without another word, sprinted toward the tomb at full speed. "What is going on?" Ye Cheng whispered, eyebrows drawing together in confusion. Outside the ancient Liu tomb, independent cultivators were on the verge of giving up and retreating in frustration. They'd been barred by the imposing enforcers dispatched from the major sects, among them the formidable Mingyue sect. Then, without warning, those very enforcers charged toward the Qiangluo's gates, and no one dared stop them. In an instant, quick-witted independents seized the opportunity and dashed inside. The rest followed suit. Through the shimmering teleportation vortex at the main gate, they tumbled into the legendary cave heaven hidden beneath the tomb. Ye Cheng scarcely had time to regain his balance before a breathtaking panorama stopped him in his tracks. At the heart of this vast subterranean world stood palace after palace, each one bathed in a celestial glow. Every structure corresponded to an imperial-level sect's inheritance, their rooftops soaring into the swirling mists above. Towering formations protected each palace, silently humming with untold power. Even from afar, the majestic weight of those formations pressed on the newcomers' spirits like an invisible gauntlet, a stark reminder of the formidable legacies that lay within. This fluctuation in the air, why does it feel even more oppressive than the protective formation I saw at Yunqi Academy all those years ago? Could this actually be a heavenly emperor-level killing array? Fools, didn't you hear the Mingyue sect experts? This isn't even heavenly emperor level. It's a Saint Emperor grade protective formation. A circle of lower-ranked disciples from the Yingyu sect whispered among themselves, eyes wide with awe as they stared at the brilliant formation. Nearby, Chen Sheng and the other Molong Academy elders, having reached the core before the rest, examined the array with equally intense gazes. Their initial amazement soon gave way to relief. They had feared that Ye Cheng had somehow breached the formation's defenses and secretly worried they had underestimated him. Now, however, the formation's power roared undiminished. It was clear they had been over-anxious. I ask you, how could any mere attention-seeker, puffed up with his own bravado, ever hope to shatter this formation? Nang's voice rang out as he stared up at Ye Cheng, calmly perched on the drifting clouds above the ceiling array. With one hand, Ye Cheng tapped the mist, his posture as relaxed as if he were testing the weather rather than breaking through an expert's spellwork. Confident he'd exposed an amateur, Chen Sheng lifted his chin, readying another cutting remark. But before the words could leave his lips, a sudden gleam appeared where Ye Cheng's fingertip hovered. A blade of pure spiritual light, sharp and silver, lunged downward through the air. Crack! The sound split the stillness, the spiritual blade striking the formation with such force that cracks spidered out from the center. Chen Sheng's swagger vanished in an instant, his next taunt choking off as reality shattered beneath Ye Cheng's quiet power. Chapter 337. Under the watchful eyes of countless onlookers, the sword's gleam darted through the air like a silver fish, slipping past the array of intricate ceiling glyphs. Within mere heartbeats, that single blade of light plunged into the formation's epicenter. The moment it arrived, every rune and ward shattered as if warmed by spring's first sun, dissolved utterly at Ye Cheng's command, leaving no trace behind. Chen Sheng and the other Molong Academy elites stared in stunned silence. Impossible, one of them finally gasped. A Saint Emperor-grade killing array, annihilated in an instant? How advanced must his mastery of formations be? Is he himself a Saint Emperor of formations? Murmured another, disbelief lacing his voice. From the Mingyue sect's honored masters to the highest strategists of the Yingyue divine dynasty, every expert present gaped at the smoking remains of their once impenetrable defense. Only when Ye Cheng's figure flickered past them, slipping deeper into the heart of the complex, toward the heritage halls nestled at its core, did they shake themselves from their stupor. Yet even as reality settled back in, An undercurrent of unease rippled through the gathered powerhouses, none more so than Xianxia and his Molong comrades. They had witnessed a feat that defied everything they thought they knew, and now all their certainties lay in ruin. They had once greeted Ye Cheng only with hostility and contempt. Now fear had overtaken them completely. The very title of Array Saint Emperor, even if Ye Cheng had yet to attain that level, had allowed him to lift an entire sect to unprecedented heights. Admittedly, shattering a killing array crafted by a true Saint Emperor still fell short of the real thing. Yet the mere fact that he could dismantle a Saint Emperor grade formation earned him the name Peerless Array Emperor in their eyes. A man of such power would command the utmost respect. Even emperors like Empress Yingyue would bow and bid for his allegiance. "We mustn't bear personal grudges against someone like him," Xianxia murmured, "but if anyone dares to stand in his way, we must be ready to strike them down." At his side, the head of Molong Academy, a formidable Dao Zun master, and the deputy head, likewise a Dao Zun, fell silent. Yet each gave a nearly imperceptible nod, sealing their agreement. Ye Cheng paid no mind to Xianxia's curious glances or the hushed whispers of the other cultivators. His focus was fixed entirely on the inheritance treasures housed in the core area, relics of immeasurable value to the disciples of the Yingyue divine dynasty, yet of little personal interest to him. Besides, each vault was protected by formidable puppets. To claim any treasure, one first had to shatter those mechanical sentinels. Unfazed, Ye Cheng released his divine sense and methodically scanned each hall in search of the Dao seeds he had come for. For most cultivators, save the elite masters at the heads of major sects, no one could discover what lay within a sealed temple until its guardian puppet was defeated and its massive doors flung open. Ye Cheng had no such concern. Swiftly traversing the ancient corridors, he paused the moment he recognized his destination, a temple hewn from gleaming golden silkwood, its pillars and lintels adorned with intricate Zhouqin Xinghe Dao sigils. It stood there, magnificent and singular, as though waiting for him alone. When a cultivator's gaze falls upon this ancient temple, their soul is unconsciously drawn in, stirred by the intricate Dao patterns carved into every pillar and wall. Ye Cheng hovered at the threshold, letting those patterns wash over him. Deep within the sanctuary, in its most protected chamber, he detected a subtle but unmistakable pulse of qi. It was faint, almost entirely concealed by the temple's own warding seals, but enough slipped through to make his heart quicken. His soul trembled, and the flow of spiritual power in his consciousness became clearer, more energized than ever before. There was no mistaking it. Hidden inside this eye, Ninner Hall, lay the divine Dao seed that Emperor Gu Liu personally gathered. A spark of fierce excitement lit Ye Cheng's eyes. With a single thought, he surged forward and alighted on the marble steps before the chamber's heavy doors. The others who had accompanied him, powerful cultivators all, fell into step behind him, their gazes fixed on the sealed entrance with palpable anticipation. Xianxia and the rest exchanged heated looks. They knew how rare and invaluable the Emperor's Dao seed would be. And in that moment, they were reminded once more of Ye Cheng's extraordinary talent in formation arts, a skill that had carried them safely this far into the temple's innermost defenses. Now, all that remained was to breach that final seal and claim whatever lay beyond. With his mastery of formation arts, Ye Cheng's spiritual awareness couldn't be weak. The very inheritance palace that admitted him must guard priceless treasures, and not just ordinary relics, but artifacts of tremendous power. Yet when Ye Cheng shattered the palace's formation earlier, his spiritual fluctuations were surprisingly restrained. He's still only at the venerable rank. Xianxia and the other Molong Academy leaders exchanged glances. He won't have time to set up any killing array here. If we move together, we can seize the moment and intercept him. They turned their gaze toward the heads of the Mingwei sect and Tianjing Academy. Noticing that attention, those leaders' eyes lit up with interest. Ye Cheng's earlier display of strength kept them cautious, but unlike Molong Academy, neither sect bore him any ill will. In fact, they all silently considered recruiting him. Nothing would please them more than to have a talent like Ye Cheng join their ranks. Xianxia and the others watched in frustration as neither faction's leaders made a move. Behind their polite masks, they all thought the others shameless. But without those factions' support, Molong Academy alone had no hope of taking down Ye Cheng. While they wavered, Ye Cheng had already acted. With a soft swish, he stepped forward and appeared directly before the palace's main gate. The instant his presence registered, the gargantuan armored figure propping up the entrance trembled. Stone chips flaked off its surface as its eyes flared blood red, fixing hungrily on Ye Cheng. "Trialist, step back," it rumbled in a hollow, emotionless tone. A moment later, the ground itself seemed to roar. An overwhelming surge of imperial energy rippled outward in a thunderous boom. Everyone present recognized at once the true nature of this guardian. A puppet construct, its power rivaling that of a Xuan emperor. Yet as impressive as it was, they all knew it still trailed far behind the strength Ye Cheng had already demonstrated. All eyes snapped to the palace looming behind the guardian puppet. With the puppet's revival, the oppressive aura of the palace's forbidden Tao array had weakened dramatically. Ye Cheng and the others could now plainly sense the pulsing power of a Tao seed hidden within the inheritance hall. This is a spiritual seed of the great Tao. The headmaster of Molong Academy blurted, his usually drooping eyelids snapping open. Greed flared in his gaze. Beside him, the Grand Elder of the Mingyue sect and the vice head of Sky Eagle Academy, each leading their own expedition, mirrored his fevered excitement. To any cultivator on the cusp of the Emperor realm, a great Tao seed was an irresistible trophy. Refining one could boost their odds of ascension from a mere 10% to an assured 100 and shatter every limit on their potential. "We cannot let this chance slip away," Ye Cheng declared, stepping forward without hesitation. On both sides, the leaders of the Mingyue sect and the Sky Eagle Academy gave a curt nod. Joining Chen Sheng and the other senior figures from Molong Academy, they quietly stepped forward and formed a tight circle around Ye Cheng at the center. Chapter 338. "Commander, what should we do?" one of the Yingyue guards whispered anxiously. Hua Yuejiao's brow creased in surprise. None of them had expected to uncover a Tao seed buried deep in Emperor Lu's ancient tomb. Tao seeds were the rarest treasures in the cultivation world, capable of purifying a practitioner's path and triggering a near rebirth. Even if this seed's elemental affinity clashed with one's current method, a skilled cultivator could always adjust their technique. Such an opportunity was priceless. Yet Hua Yuejiao's loyalty lay with the Yingyue Empress, now newly enthroned. This Tao seed would offer the Empress little direct benefit. Worse, if it fell into the hands of Chen Sheng or other senior figures in the Mingyue sect or the Molong Academy, the balance of power could shift dangerously against Yingyue. By contrast, Ye Cheng was steadfast and reliable. If anyone could be trusted to secure the Tao seed for the Empress's advantage, it was him. Ye Cheng's exceptional skill in array formations had not gone unnoticed, and Hua Yuejiao now regarded him as indispensable. The moment the thought crossed her mind, her decision was made. With a flash of movement, she swept forward, flanked by a dozen of the Yingyue guards. They formed a protective ring around Ye Cheng, cutting off Chen Sheng and the other Mingyu strongmen from getting near. Raising her voice, she declared, "I'm sorry, gentlemen, but I won't let you lay a finger on Coach Gu. If any of you want to test your strength, you'll have to go through me first. I can't promise I'll beat you all in a straight fight, but I'll buy fellow cultivator Ye Cheng the time he needs to set up his killing formation." Her words hung in the air like a challenge. Cold scowls flickered across Chen Sheng's face and that of his companions. They met her gaze with thinly veiled hostility, yet Hua Yuejiao did not waver. She glared back at them, blade at the ready. From the sidelines, the Mingyue sect's Grand Elder, silent until now, gave a dismissive sneer. "Commander Hua," he said, voice low and mocking, "you're clever at seizing the moment. Unfortunately, you're one step short of success." He lifted his hand in a slow, deliberate gesture, and in that instant, the air around him rippled with menace. Boom! A small crimson bell shimmered into existence in Grand Elder Ye Cheng's hand, its surface alive with flowing red light that arched into the ethereal shape of vermilion bird wings. The instant it appeared, the temperature in the core arena spiked as if the sun itself had descended. A scorching aura pulsed outward, its searing heat and spiritual force rolling across the Yingyue guards opposite them and leeching the spiritual power from their bodies under the bell's invisible grip. Hua Yujiao's face drained of color. With a single, horrified glance, she recognized the weapon's true nature. One of the Mingyue sect's greatest treasures, an imperial-level, mid-tier spiritual weapon on par with a Heavenly Emperor artifact, the Flamebird Bell. Across the battlefield, the Yingyue guards' defiance crumbled into dread. Though the Mingyu sect had no emperor, its centuries-old lineage of transcendent inheritances had always commanded respect, even from the Yingyu queen herself. Now their ultimate trump card stood revealed in Ye Cheng's hand. They had underestimated the Grand Elder and the power he wielded. Hua Yujiao and her companions watched with sour expressions as the Grand Elder of the Mingyu sect brimmed with pride. "Commander Hua," he said, voice dripping with condescension, "you're far too young and impetuous. Frankly, the Yonke Bell is only one of the treasures I've inherited." He sneered at the armored general standing guard before the palace, contempt gleaming in his eyes. "Blessed by these legacies, and supported by my devoted disciples, victory is all but assured. Even stripped of them, I'd still rate a 50-50 chance against this so-called Xuan Emperor-level puppet you're so eager to defend." But his words hardly registered with Ye Cheng. As soon as the Grand Elder finished speaking, Ye Cheng stepped forward, never once looking back, never pausing for doubt. He didn't flinch at the Mingyue sect's threats or their scorn. With unwavering resolve, he closed the distance and met the towering Xuan Emperor-level puppet in a thunderous head-on collision. Ye Cheng lifted his hand slightly and pressed thumb to forefinger. In an instant, a blade of light, purer and whiter than freshly fallen snow, materialized between his fingers. The Taoist master of the Mingyue sect, who had been lecturing with palpable pride, cut off mid-sentence. Behind him, Chen Sheng, Dean Molong, Deputy Dean Tianying, and even Hua Yuejiao with her Yingyue guards froze in astonishment. All eyes were fixed on the Xuan Emperor-level war puppet standing before Ye Cheng. Without a chance to defend itself or strike back, the automaton was severed in two as effortlessly as slicing tofu. With a muted thud, its twin halves clanged to the ground. The sound, the final punctuation on an impossibly swift victory, snapped Chen Sheng and the others out of their stunned silence. They stared in disbelief at the ruined puppet, struggling to comprehend how a single flick of light could accomplish what dozens of cultivators had failed to do. A stunned silence fell over the assembly as they stared at Ye Cheng, newly arrived at the heart of the Inheritance Palace. None could believe what they'd just witnessed. A cultivator of the Xuan Emperor realm, an almost mythic tier in the entire Yingyue divine dynasty, had been sliced clean in two by a single sword light from Ye Cheng. Such overwhelming killing power defied description. Without pausing for comment, Ye Cheng stepped past the fallen guardian puppet and into the palace's inner sanctum. The moment its mechanical body collapsed, the intricate runes that had sealed the great Tao seed dissolved into nothingness. Calmly, he reached forward and plucked the radiant seed from its altar. When Ye Cheng re-emerged, Chen Sheng and the other intruders were nowhere to be seen. Only Hui Jiao and a handful of Yingyue guards remained, their faces a tangle of awe and apprehension. Initially, Hua Yuejiao had recruited him merely for extra support, but his decisive actions had far exceeded anyone's expectations. Offering her a curt nod, Ye Cheng turned his back on the courtyard. Alone, he strode toward the ancient tomb beyond, its yawning entrance promising the next trial of his destiny. Chen Sheng and the others had thought Ye Cheng a bit too arrogant, though none of them dared say so aloud. Yet in an instant, he shattered their formation and demonstrated his true power. With a single, flawless stroke, he dispatched a Xuandi-level spirit puppet, instantly shattering everyone's assumptions about his limits. Hua Yueao, commander of the Imperial Guards, found herself staring in awe at the swordsman cloaked in white. In his serene poise and effortless grace, she saw something otherworldly, like a fallen immortal, a galaxy of mysteries contained within a single man. Her heart quickened, and she felt an irresistible urge to draw closer, to uncover every secret he still kept hidden. "Commander Hua, is there anything else?" Ye Cheng asked, glancing toward the Imperial Guard leader as she lingered at the edge of the clearing. Hua Yuejiao blinked, shaking off her reverie. She dipped into a respectful bow. No further instructions, Commander Gu. Then, with one last measured look at him, she turned and signaled her unit to fall back. Hua Yuejiao's tone had shifted to one of deep respect as she bowed before him. Your Highness Ye Cheng, although Molong Academy, Tianying Academy, and the Mingyue sect have all withdrawn for now, you possess the seed of the great Tao, a prize of immeasurable worth. Rest assured, they will not abandon their claim so easily. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Your Highness is undoubtedly powerful, but these three powers are nothing to dismiss, especially the Mingyue sect. Its foundations run so deep that even Empress Yingyue herself regards them with caution. She offered him a solution. If it pleases your Highness, I can arrange an introduction to my master. With his support, even if the Mingyue sect overpowers Yunqi Academy, they will find it impossible to wrest the Tao seed from your grasp. A flicker of anxiety crossed her face, and she hurried to clarify. My master has long since ascended to the Emperor realm. Though the Tao seed is invaluable, it holds little utility for him. There is no hidden scheme here, Taoist friend. You have my word. Ye Cheng let out a low laugh at her earnestness, the corner of his mouth tilting into a wry smile. Ye Cheng shook his head, brushing past the outstretched hand of Commander Hua Yuejiao. Thank you for your offer, Commander, but I must decline. He turned and strode toward the tomb's exit without another word. The Tao's seed lay safely in his grasp. Everything else in Emperor Gu Liu's burial chamber held no further appeal for him. Hua Yuejiao stood frozen for a moment, her expression a mixture of surprise and frustration. She opened her mouth as if to call him back, but before she could speak, one of her lieutenants from the Yingyue guards interrupted. Commander, the deputy said, voice low and seasoned with resentment, there's no point in persuading him any further. Lord Ye Cheng's arrogance blinds him. He won't reconsider until he strikes a hard enough blow against himself. We've said our piece. Let him learn his lesson on his own. A few of the other guards smirked, eyes gleaming at the prospect. One of them sneered. Meanwhile, Chen Sheng and his men have already retreated, left without even searching the rest of the tomb. They couldn't bear the effort, it seems. Hua Yuejiao clenched her jaw, but she knew better than to argue. Ye Cheng's departure marked not just a personal refusal, but a challenge she would not forget. As the echo of his footsteps faded, the cavernous tomb felt emptier than ever. Hua Yuejiao's lips curled into a bitter smile as she listened to her subordinates whisper among themselves. It's obvious they've gone back for the ultimate weapon to deal with His Highness Ye Cheng, one guard muttered. If he'd only known when to advance and when to retreat, and been willing to join forces with us, we'd never have feared him. But now, ha! Her chest tightened with frustration. She had long given up on persuading Ye Cheng to take their side, yet she couldn't help trailing after him. At least that way, she could come to his aid if things turned ugly. Stepping forward, she raised her voice so everyone could hear. Even if Chen Sheng and the others unleash that deadly weapon, His Highness's prowess ensures his life won't be in jeopardy. Aligning ourselves with him will earn us merits, not censure. At Hua Yuejiao's declaration, the disgruntled Yingyue guards fell silent. Together, they followed her through the winding corridors of the tomb until they emerged at Changlu's main gate. No sooner had they crossed the threshold than the air around them trembled with raw, murderous intent, so overwhelming that Hua Yuejiao and her men instinctively staggered back, each coughing as if a physical weight pressed against their chests. A violent pulse of energy rippled outward from the dark horizon, promising that whatever awaited them beyond the gate would be far deadlier than any weapon they had yet encountered. At the edge of their vision, Chen Sheng's gray-brown formation materialized before the Qianglu, its oppressive, desolate aura stretching endlessly, and for a moment it entirely concealed Ye Cheng's figure. Chapter 339. Ye Cheng's eyes widened as he took in the sprawling formation before him. Is that the Tianhuang Great Array? Molong Academy has actually deployed it? The Tianhuang Great Array is legendary throughout the Yingyue Divine Dynasty, and its fame stretches even into the southern wilderness and among the 36 states of Tianhuang. Legend holds that it was bequeathed by a first-rank sect that once dominated these lands. What makes this array so fearsome is its scalability. At its peak, it can ensnare and annihilate saints. In its simplest form, it remains devastatingly lethal. What Ye Cheng now witnessed was precisely that basic configuration. 5 imperial weapons, undoubtedly gifts from the Mingyue sect, had been stationed as focal points to suppress the array's chaotic energies, while 13 Daozun realm masters, led by Xianxia himself, stood within to anchor its power. Even with so few resources, the raw killing force radiating from this elementary version of the Tianhuang Great Array was enough to send shivers through anyone who understood its true potential. Even a perfected Xuan Emperor caught in this array would have his spiritual energy leached away by the desolate aura of the Tianhuang formation. Not only that, Xianxia continued, voice cold and triumphant, the array devours every attack aimed at those trapped within, like a mortal flailing in quicksand. The more you struggle, the faster you sink. High above on the platform, Huoyu Jiao's heart turned to ice. She knew Ye Cheng was a formation's prodigy in his own right, but his skill level could not compare to this. After all, even the simplest Tianhuang formation was a first-rank sect treasure, a legacy of saintly power. No matter how talented Ye Cheng was, whether his mastery peaked at Xuan Emperor or even Saint Emperor, he stood no chance of breaking it. Below, Xianxia and the others exchanged smug glances, their confidence shining in their eyes as they looked up at him. Xianxia raised his chin. Well, Ye Cheng, tell us this. Do you really believe you can still do whatever you want? The Grand Elder of the Mingyue sect stood beside the sect leader, sneering down at Ye Cheng with the predatory gleam of a hunter eyeing fresh quarry. Contempt dripped from his words as he spoke. This is your final chance. Swear a solemn oath of service to the Mingyue sect, never betray us again, and hand over the seed of the great Tao you've stolen. Refuse, and today will be the day you die. This is too much. Huoyu Jiao's voice trembled with outrage. Beside her, the other disciples bristled at the elder's demand, but none dared to challenge the trap array's deadly aura. They exchanged helpless glances and turned anxiously to Ye Cheng for a solution. A slow, confident smile curved Ye Cheng's lips. He relaxed his shoulders, as if the very array binding them were nothing more than a light breeze. A mere Xuandi-level trap array has you so full of yourself that you think you can kill me here? He lifted a hand and aimed a single finger at the ground. Self-righteous fools. In an instant, a shaft of cold, brilliant light flickered into existence at his fingertip, cutting through the air like a drawn sword. It was the same fearsome blade of energy he had unleashed when shattering the core array in the ancient Liu Tomb Palace. Xianxia and the others met his display with nothing but mocking laughter and disdain. Calmly, they folded their arms, daring him to try again. But Ye Cheng's eyes shone with steady determination. The moment of truth had arrived. Ye Cheng's swordlight sprang to life, arcing toward the heart of the formation. Instantly, the choking gray fog surged up, ravenous and roaring, swallowing the blade's radiance in an instant. From the edge of the formation, a cold, triumphant voice rang out. Pathetic trickery. Not even a single stroke can pierce this array. Xianxia and his companions broke into wider grins, their eyes glinting with mockery. Even Huoyu Jiao and the other Yingyue guards turned away, unable to bear witness to what they were certain would be Ye Cheng's final defeat. The atmosphere crackled with cruel confidence, until, without warning, a sharp tearing sound cut the silence. Swish, swish, swish! Every head whipped around at once. In the dense haze of the magical array, supposedly powerful enough to drain the strength of a heavenly emperor, Ye Cheng's swordlight emerged, dazzling and bright. Where the blade passed, the mist recoiled as if scorched by flame. Long swaths of the gray fog disintegrated into thin air, dissolving like snow beneath the morning sun. Shock froze the onlookers. That which was meant to devour his spirit was literally melting away before his strike. Ye Cheng stood at the edge of the clearing, his blade still humming with energy, his eyes calm and focused. The tide of battle had just begun to turn, and for those who had dismissed him so readily, this moment would prove unforgettable. In an instant, Ye Cheng's swordlight swept through the desolate formation, tearing it apart like glass. The flash of steel cut straight through Xianxia and his fellow Daozun realm masters. Blood blossomed in the air, dyeing the surrounding mists crimson. Spectators watched in stunned silence as one after another, the Daozun warriors fell like rain. When they finally snapped back to their senses, their jaws hung open. Ye Cheng stood alone amid the wreckage, more god than man. By the time a single incense stick burned down, the fight was already over. Whatever plans Chen Sheng had laid were shattered in that one swift strike, and Ye Cheng hadn't even broken a sweat. With his enemies dispatched, he sheathed his sword and soared skyward, bound for Luoshan Academy. There, he intended to begin refining the Dao seeds he'd risked everything to seize. Huayue Zhao and the others watched him go, their mouths opening and closing without finding words. None of them had ever imagined Ye Cheng's power could exceed even the Xuan Emperor realm, or that he could dismantle a high-level formation and slay Daozun masters so effortlessly. They remained rooted in place, awestruck by the legend in their midst. Huayue Zhao couldn't help but laugh quietly to herself. Of all people, she'd once thought to recruit Lord Ye Cheng, whose power now made even the legendary soul-stealing ancestor of the 13 divine dynasties seem insignificant by comparison. Lost in that thought, she leapt a breath too soon. A whisper of wind announced the arrival of a second figure overhead. The newcomer wore the same silver armor as Huayue Zhao and her Yingyu guards, though its filigree was unmistakably one rank lower. She was one of the guard unit's deputy commanders. Calm, collected, and renowned throughout the divine dynasty for her Daozun cultivation, this deputy commander was never one to show surprise. Yet now her usual poise had vanished, replaced by wide-eyed disbelief. With barely a pause to steady herself, she alighted before Huayue Zhao and blurted out, "Commander, I've confirmed the information." According to the latest dispatch from Yunqi Academy, an uninvited guest showed up, and that wasn't even their excuse. There truly is a formidable figure who stormed into Yunqi Academy and compelled Master Yunqi to bow. And Master Yunqi, he's a Xuan Emperor-level cultivator. A Xuan Emperor? Huayue Zhao and the others exchanged astonished glances. After witnessing Ye Cheng's remarkable strength, few in the Yingyue divine dynasty could impress them. Yet Master Yunqi's reputation was unique. He'd spent over a decade in seclusion, only to emerge at the Xuan Emperor threshold. The notion that someone powerful enough to humble him had appeared naturally piqued their curiosity. Respect, certainly, but reverence was reserved for far rarer achievements. The deputy commander, breathless from his hurried arrival, allowed himself a triumphant grin. He was convinced he'd just delivered the most critical intelligence of all. At that moment, Huayue Zhao and the others turned to the deputy commander, their faces shining with curiosity and a touch of gossip-driven excitement. One of them cleared her throat. "Commander, what's going on?" The deputy commander looked at them in mild bewilderment. Huayue Zhao waved a slender jade-like hand. "I'll explain everything in a moment," she said. "First, what have you discovered about the mysterious powerhouse who just arrived?" The deputy commander straightened and met Huayue Zhao's gaze. "We've confirmed his identity," she announced. "He's the very man who not only humiliated Taoist Yunqi, but forced the entire Yunqi Academy to surrender and swear fealty. He's also the one who slew Deputy Dean Lei of Molong Academy during the 100 Academy War. His name is Ye Cheng." A murmur rippled through the group. One of Huayue Zhao's companions nodded. "That fits perfectly. There really couldn't be anyone else." The deputy commander leaned forward, anticipation written all over her face. She expected shock or awe, but met only calm, collected expressions. "Commander," she ventured, "you knew this already, didn't you? How could you keep it from us?" Huayue Zhao smiled serenely, as though preparing to reveal a long-held secret. "Patience," she said, "all in good time. This news shouldn't have come from Yunqi College so soon." The deputy commander frowned, clearly puzzled. Seeing his confusion, Huayue Zhao gave his shoulder a reassuring tap. "Don't jump to conclusions. Your report is indeed current, but we've just received fresh intelligence." With that, she outlined Ye Cheng's record in swift, precise strokes. As she spoke, the deputy commander's eyes grew wider and wider until he was nearly speechless. A single sword blow that destroyed a Xuanditir puppet, turning back the Mingyue sect, the Molong forces, and Tianying College all on his own, and then shattering the Tianhuang formation with one strike? He ran a hand through his hair, bewildered. Who or what could wield such power in our Yinghui divine dynasty? Chapter 340. Deep within Luotian Academy's spirit realm, Ye Cheng sat in silent meditation. Then, dong, dong, dong. Like the tolling of a massive Taoist bell, that sonorous echo rippled through every hall, courtyard, and practice chamber. Masters and disciples alike found their minds stilled by the sound. In that instant of shared resonance, every obstacle and lingering doubt in their cultivation was swept away, replaced by crystal-clear insight. In the central chamber, Luo Li and Chang Sunming stood side by side, hearts pounding. I never imagined someone's personal breakthrough could trigger enlightenment in everyone around them, Luo Li murmured, awed. A soft radiance glimmered in her eyes, proof of the sudden, profound clarity she'd just received. Chang Sunming's expression was equally astonished. The source of this transformative power? None other than Ye Cheng, the young master they'd long admired. To witness his strength manifest so tangibly was almost unbelievable. Yet, recalling the rumors of his recent advances, Chang Sunming felt relief as well as wonder. It was clear Master Ye Cheng had entered a new stage of his path. He was fusing his third Tao seed. A ripple of exhilaration spread through Luotian Academy. If the birth of a single Tao seed could unleash such a tidal wave of enlightenment, what heights would Ye Cheng reach next? An occurrence like this is perfectly natural, Chang Sunming whispered, his voice barely more than a breath. Luo Li nodded in agreement, her radiant eyes filled with awe as she gazed into the heart of the spirit land, where Ye Cheng sat in deep seclusion. In recent weeks, the young prodigy of Luotian Academy had shattered the dreaded Tianhuang formation at the ancient Lu tomb and slain Chen Sheng's expedition, deeds that elevated him to the undisputed #1 cultivator in the Yingyu divine dynasty. His reputation now extended far beyond Yunqi and Luotian academies. Even the royal family treated him with the highest respect. With the backing of loyal vassals, Ye Cheng had harvested 3 additional Tao spirit seeds, bringing his total to 5. Half a month ago, he had already unleashed a mighty roar of Tao, an event that rocked the heavens but still fell short of today's spectacle. Nothing less than the successful fusion of multiple Tao seeds could account for such a breathtaking phenomenon. Master first fused 1 Tao spirit seed long ago, Chang Sunming continued, and completed the second fusion just a fortnight past. What we're witnessing now can only be the birth of another level of Tao. It looks like the fusion of the third Tao seed is nearly complete. If word of this gets out, it won't just rattle the 36 states of Tianhuang, it will shake the entire northern wilderness. Chang Sunming murmured, eyes wide with shock and disbelief. The great world of the northern wilderness divine continent had only been restored a little over 20 years, and while Tao seeds were as precious as imperial treasures, they were not impossible to find for powerful powers like the Yinghui divine dynasty. The real challenge lay in absorbing and fusing them. As a rule, only those who had reached the Saint Realm in the Great World even had a chance to merge a single great Tao seed. Fusing a second was almost unheard of. So far, only the young masters of the Moon Spirit clan and the barbarian God clan had managed 2, and each hit their limit upon completion. And now, Ye Cheng was on the verge of a third. Ye Cheng had already begun fusing what everyone believed to be the third seed of the great Tao, and success seemed all but certain. Even among the greatest prodigies of every era, achieving that milestone would mark him as a peerless talent. Chang Sunming and Luo Li exchanged awed glances, their hearts swelling with admiration. What they didn't suspect, hidden deep within the spiritual land, was that Ye Cheng wasn't working on the third seed at all, but the 5th. Boom! A thunderous roar shattered the stillness of the void. In an instant, jagged bolts of lightning ashed out, converging on Ye Cheng's cross-legged form. For ordinary cultivators, fusing even 1 great Tao seed is a monumental achievement. The second and third are almost inconceivable. Yet Ye Cheng was no ordinary cultivator. He possessed the Chaos Body, the first innate divine physique ever seen among humans. Thanks to this extraordinary gift, merging his second and third seeds had proceeded without so much as a tremor. Now, as he strained to integrate the 5th seed, the energies involved were far more violent. Lightning crackled like furious dragons, the void itself quivered, and the very aura of the Great Tao spiraled outward in a dazzling, world-shaking display of power. Half a month ago, Ye Cheng had fused the fourth seed of the Great Tao, a feat that already marked him as prodigious. Today, he prepared to merge the fifth. Yet no matter how exceptional his talent, advancing to a fifth Tao seed inevitably invited a heavenly tribulation. At that moment, Ye Cheng withdrew into a secluded spirit realm. No one else witnessed what happened next, and if they had, they would have been struck dumb with disbelief. Suddenly, the skies above him darkened. Great bolts of celestial thunder tore through the void like coiling dragons, each crack of lightning resonating with the depth of an abyss. A single strike of such power could reduce even an emperor to cinders. But as the thunderbolt crashed down upon Ye Cheng, it felt, to his astonishment, like a gentle caress, mere tickles that failed to rattle his form. For 15 long minutes, the storm raged unabated. Thunder boomed, lightning danced, and the world seemed to tremble under the onslaught, yet Ye Cheng stood unmoved, his calm gaze fixed inward. At last, the thunderclouds dissolved, the roar of thunder faded, and silence returned. Rising to his feet, Ye Cheng stretched, marveling at the new surge of divine power coursing through his veins. A bright anticipation lit his eyes. The fuse was complete, and the path of the Great Tao lay open before him once more. Ye Cheng felt power surging through every fiber of his being. After fusing the 5 Tao seeds, his strength had leapt to an entirely new plane. No longer did he need to rely on backup strategies like the Xianxia sword formation. His personal combat prowess alone was enough to dispatch opponents at the quasi-sage perfection level. And when he did choose to call upon his 2 greatest trump cards, the purple Qi cauldron of all living beings and the Xianxia sword formation, his combined might could rival that of the saints themselves. It wasn't inconceivable that he might even catch one unawares and slay them outright. But Ye Cheng's eyes were fixed on a loftier prize, the fabled 6 paths of reincarnation body. In the cultivation world, it was celebrated as the first acquired divine body. By contrast, his awakened chaos body was the first innate divine body, an honor he already possessed from birth. When he had first unlocked the destiny blueprint for the 6 paths body, he felt nothing more than clinical curiosity. Now, with each passing day, the prophesied moment drew nearer, and an uncanny premonition tugged at the edge of his mind. Seated cross-legged atop a jade-carved dais, Ye Cheng reflected on the symmetry of his fates. One divine body born of chaos, the other forged through ceaseless effort. Together, they would complete the perfect cycle of nurture and nature, granting him unrivaled command over life, death, and rebirth. The mere thought set his blood alight. To hold in his hands both the first innate and the first acquired divine bodies would be to ascend beyond mortal comprehension. As he channeled his remaining energy into the Tao seeds, Ye Cheng's heart thundered with anticipation. Golden runes spiraled around him, each one a testament to his relentless toil. The cultivators who witnessed this phenomenon whispered in awe, for they knew legends spoke of such a convergence only once in every soon. Very soon, the seal on the 6 paths of reincarnation body would shatter, and an new epoch in the worlds of cultivation would dawn under Ye Cheng's dominion. Ye Cheng knew that once his chaos body and reincarnation body began to resonate, they might even undergo some unforeseen metamorphosis. He couldn't predict the exact outcome of that transformation, but he was convinced it would elevate his fate to an entirely new stratum, and the thought made him quietly impatient. The northern wilderness divine continent did harbor scattered seeds of the great Tao, but locating them was no simple matter. To date, Ye Cheng had already mobilized nearly every resource the Yingyue divine dynasty could muster in his search for these elusive treasures. If he wanted to unearth the 6th seed, he realized he would have to exercise patience. Thankfully, he had prepared for precisely this delay. 2 weeks earlier, he dispatched Luo Li and a small party to relay secret instructions to the Yongqi royal family. From behind the scenes, he would serve as their hidden patron, driving the Yongqi clan to seize rival forces on the outskirts of the Yingyue divine dynasty, several dynasties whose prestige rivaled even Yingyue's own. Every conquest they secured would in turn raise his chances of discovering another great Tao seed. Ye Cheng glanced at the fading ripples in the air and calculated the time. By now, the Xianxia royal family should have responded. Lost in thought, he barely registered the sudden whoosh beside him, until Luo Li and Chang Sunming materialized and landed softly before him. They bowed in unison. "We have good news, Your Highness," Luo Li began, her eyes bright with excitement. Over the past few days, the Xianxia royal family has reached out to several other divine dynasties, inviting them to join our cause. While the formal agreements aren't sealed yet, talks are proceeding smoothly. Chang Sunming stepped forward and continued. And there's more. An envoy from Xianxia just returned from the neighboring Lingyue divine dynasty. He brings word that the Juxiao auction house, renowned as the top auctioneer in Lingyue, is about to host a major event. Luo Li picked up the thread. The grand finale of that auction will be a Dao spirit seed imbued with the true meaning of the sword. Ye Cheng's pulse quickened. A Dao spirit seed, and one steeped in sword lore, could tip the balance in their favor. Whatever challenges lay ahead, this auction might just hold the key.